Someone just walked out of a boardroom with your money. They had a PowerPoint, a prototype, and a handshake. You didn't ask enough questions. Neither did anyone else. Here are 101 reasons why. 1. Before the Segway became the official vehicle of mall security and airport tour guides, someone looked at a two-wheeled scooter and declared it would make cars obsolete and force cities to redesign their entire infrastructure around it. Not a minor prediction. Not cautious optimism. Dean Kamen, the inventor, told insiders it would be bigger than the internet. Steve Jobs, a man who understood disruption better than almost anyone alive, reportedly agreed that cities would be rebuilt for this machine. Investors responded by pouring roughly $90 million into the project before a single unit reached a consumer. Production targets were set at 10,000 units per week. 10,000 per week. What actually happened is that cities banned the device from sidewalks and roads. Sales never exceeded roughly 6,000 units per year globally, and the company was eventually sold for less than $80 million total before the product line was quietly discontinued in 2020 after 19 years of being the punchline nobody planned for. $90 million. The machine got banned from the sidewalk it was supposed to replace. 2. While you were living your normal life, a Stanford dropout built a machine that would democratize healthcare forever. One finger prick, a single drop of blood, 200 tests, your entire medical profile in minutes, available at the pharmacy, no doctor required. Elizabeth Holmes raised over $700 million on this story and achieved a peak valuation of $9 billion, making her the youngest self-made female billionaire in history at the time. The device was called the Edison. The Edison could reliably run a small handful of tests and produced wildly inaccurate results on everything else. For the remaining tests, Theranos secretly used standard Siemens laboratory machines, the exact equipment the company claimed to have made obsolete, while telling investors and patients otherwise. Holmes was convicted in 2022 on 4 counts of fraud and sentenced to over 11 years in federal prison. $9 billion. The machine needed a different machine to do the actual job. Your dishwasher has a better accuracy rate than a diagnostic device that was supposed to replace hospitals, and at least the dishwasher cleans what it claims to clean. 3. In the year 2001, a company called DigiSense Inc. had a vision so bold it defies mockery. They were going to make the internet smell, not metaphorically, literally. A USB device called the iSmell would plug into your computer and, synchronized to whatever was on your screen, pump customized odors directly into your face from a cartridge containing 128 primary scents. They raised approximately $20 million in venture capital for this. The device would supposedly combine its scent library to replicate any smell in a digital database. The company folded before a single unit reached a consumer. PC World later named it one of the 25 worst tech products of all time. The foundational problem, the one nobody apparently raised in the pitch meeting, is that humans experience smell as involuntary and contextual. You cannot consent to a scent cannon aimed at your nose. If you are browsing real estate listings and the house smells like synthetic ocean air, that is not immersive. That is a USB device assaulting you while you try to pay your mortgage. $20 million. The internet has been fine without a nose for 30 years. It will continue to be fine. 4. On March 23, 1989, 2 chemists at the University of Utah held a press conference to announce they had achieved nuclear fusion at room temperature, in a glass jar, using heavy water. They called it cold fusion, and they told the press before peer review had even started, because apparently when you believe you have solved energy forever, waiting for scientific validation feels like a bureaucratic formality. The announcement sent the scientific world into a frenzy. Hundreds of laboratories worldwide immediately attempted to replicate the experiment. Not one produced consistent positive results. The U.S. Department of Energy reviewed the claims twice, in 1989 and again in 2004, and both times found insufficient evidence. Stanley Ponce and Martin Fleischmann had discovered nothing replicable. What they had discovered was how to generate enormous attention without a working experiment. And yet, because the dream of free, limitless clean energy is genuinely irresistible, cold fusion continued attracting investment for decades afterward under rebranded names like low-energy nuclear reactions, with companies raising tens of millions as recently as the 2010s pursuing the same dead end. They held a press conference to announce they had solved physics. In a jar. The jar was wrong. 5. The product was called a hoverboard. The advertisements showed it gliding with futuristic elegance. Every single piece of marketing, every product listing, every gift guide entry called it a hoverboard. You almost certainly know someone who received one, called it a hoverboard, and wrote it on the ground, because hovering is not a feature it has ever possessed. It has 2 wheels. They sit on the floor. The floor is where the product stays. Always despite this, the market for the self-balancing 2-wheeled scooter exploded to over $1 billion in sales within its first year, with millions of units sold before regulators began paying attention. The U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission then recalled roughly 500,000 units in 2016, not because they hovered too aggressively, but because the lithium batteries were catching fire. A billion-dollar industry built on calling a wheel a wing. The product was mislabeled in the most fundamental possible way. It does not do the thing its name describes. And no meaningful legal consequences followed for anyone involved in the mass-scale mislabeling of a ground-based wheeled device as an aerial one. You knew it didn't hover. You bought it anyway. So did $1 billion worth of other people. 6. Silicon Valley reinvented juice. That sentence alone should have been the warning. In 2016, a company called Juicero launched a machine that connected to the internet, required proprietary ingredient pouches sold via subscription, and cost $699, later reduced to $400. Google Ventures was among the investors. Total investment reached approximately $120 million. The machine applied 4 tons of pressing force to pre-made ingredient pouches. 4 tons. For juice. Then, in April 2017, Bloomberg journalists picked up the proprietary pouches with their bare hands and squeezed them, producing comparable juice yield in roughly the same time as the machine. The Wi-Fi connection was real. It verified that the pouch was fresh, not expired, authorized, not counterfeit. The Wi-Fi was checking the pouch's papers. The pouch was then squeezed by a machine you could replace with your fist. The company shut down 5 months after the Bloomberg report, refunding customers $120 million for a machine whose entire mechanical function your hand performs for free, protected by an internet connection that checked whether the bag had permission to be squeezed. The logic did not require Wi-Fi. It required a refund. 7. Google has never lacked confidence. In 2013, with the full weight of the world's most powerful technology company behind them, they launched a wearable computer for your face, priced at $1,500, and announced through marketing imagery and breathless press coverage that the future had arrived and it lived above your right eye. Within months, people wearing Google Glass in public were being thrown out of bars, accused of recording strangers without consent, and referred to by a derogatory slang term so widely adopted it entered common usage: glasshole. Multiple U.S. states introduced legislation attempting to restrict driving while wearing the device. The consumer launch never happened. The Explorer program ended in January 2015, less than 2 years after it began, representing hundreds of millions in development and marketing absorbed by a product the public rejected on contact. Google then pivoted Glass to enterprise use, where factory workers, surgeons, and warehouse employees use it for hands-free checklists without anyone calling them a name for wearing it. The factory floor didn't want brunch. It wanted a checklist. Hundreds of millions of dollars spent discovering that the correct market for a hands-free screen is the one where the user has their hands full, not the one where they're holding a coffee. 8. Supermodels, private islands, yachts, curated musical experiences so exclusive they cost up to $100,000. Billy McFarland and Jay Rule raised approximately $26 million and sold the dream through a viral social media campaign featuring luxury imagery so saturated with aspiration that roughly 5,000 people wired between $1,500 and $100,000 each without verifying a single logistical detail. When attendees arrived at Great Exuma Island in 2017, they found construction chaos, disaster relief tents, prepackaged cheese sandwiches, and a complete absence of any musical infrastructure. The yacht was a photograph. The villa was a tent. The gourmet catering was a styrofoam container. McFarland was arrested within months, pled guilty to 2 counts of wire fraud in 2018, and was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Multiple documentaries were released within the year, and the event became the definitive cultural case study in how social media aspiration can completely bypass rational due diligence among otherwise functional adults. $26 million raised. The cheese sandwich became famous. The yacht existed only as a file on a computer somewhere. Instagram showed you the photograph. Nobody asked to see the tent first. 9. 2 former Google employees announced in 2017 that they had solved the corner store. Their solution was a Wi-Fi connected pantry box loaded with consumer goods, monitored by cameras, placed in gyms, offices, and apartment lobbies. They named it Bodega, after the independently owned corner stores, many operated by immigrant families, that it explicitly intended to replace. The name and stated goal generated immediate, unanimous, and entirely predictable public backlash, covered by every major publication within 48 hours of the announcement. The company raised approximately $2.5 million in seed funding for the initial launch, and went on to raise roughly $45 million total across subsequent funding rounds after rebranding to Stockwell in 2018. The core product was a vending machine with better cameras. The core ambition was to displace a community institution. The neighborhood read the press release. You raised $45 million to build a vending machine, named it after the businesses it was designed to eliminate, announced that publicly, and then acted surprised when the announcement was received as a provocation rather than a disruption. The vending machine was not the problem. The name was not the problem. The problem was that you said the quiet part using a full-page press release. 10. A lifestyle brand sold a polished stone egg, designed for internal use, claiming it balanced hormones, regulated menstrual cycles, and connected the user to ancient feminine wisdom. Goop, founded by Gwyneth Paltrow, began selling jade and rose quartz eggs in 2017, priced between $55 and $66, with marketing language describing hormonal and energetic benefits. Gynecologists responded immediately and publicly, warning that porous stones used internally could harbor bacteria and potentially cause bacterial vaginosis or toxic shock syndrome if worn for extended periods. The California Food, Drug, and Medical Device Task Force agreed there was a problem. The Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office joined a multi-jurisdictional complaint. Goop settled for $145,000 and agreed not to make unsubstantiated health claims without scientific evidence. Goop's annual revenue has since been reported at over $250 million. The settlement was $145,000. The revenue is $250 million. You are doing this math correctly. The fine for claiming a stone egg balances your hormones is approximately 1/17 of 1% of annual revenue. The regulatory deterrent did not deter. The jade egg remains spiritually significant to the balance sheet. 11. Luther Burbank was genuinely one of the most accomplished plant breeders in American history. His work with plums, strawberries, and dozens of other crops was legitimate, documented, and consequential, which is precisely why, when he announced he had spent over 16 years developing a spineless cactus that would feed the world, livestock, people, entire continents, all from arid wasteland requiring no irrigation, investors, farmers, and agricultural societies across the United States and internationally handed over significant money without demanding the level of scrutiny the claim deserved. The spineless Opuntia cactus was real. Burbank had genuinely bred varieties without spines. What was not real was the scale of the promise. Multiple agricultural studies in subsequent decades found that palatability to livestock was inconsistent, nutritional value was modest, and the irrigation-free agricultural miracle was substantially overstated. Burbank's reputation suffered measurably. He was criticized by the scientific community for making sweeping public claims without peer-reviewed evidence, a controversy that remains part of his legacy to this day. 16 years, significant investor capital, agricultural societies on multiple continents, and the cows, presented with the revolutionary feed source that was going to end hunger, reviewed it and passed. The cows gave the product its most accurate market assessment. Nobody asked the cows first. 12. The sock puppet was the mascot. There was a Super Bowl commercial. Wall Street was enthusiastic. Pets.com, launched in 1998, raised approximately $82.5 million in its February 2000 IPO, and briefly achieved a market capitalization of roughly $290 million on the strength of a business model that nobody in the room appears to have stress tested against basic arithmetic. The company was selling pet food on the internet and shipping heavy bags of kibble to customers' doors. The unit economics were inverted. The cost of shipping bulky, heavy, low-margin supplies consistently exceeded what customers paid for them. They were losing money on every single box shipped. Then they spent $1.2 million on a Super Bowl advertisement 2 months before going public, in January of 2000, to tell more people about the business that lost money per transaction. By November 2000, 9 months after the IPO, Pets.com shut down entirely. The sock puppet mascot was auctioned off at bankruptcy proceedings. The logic that selling something for less than it costs to deliver is not a business model was available before the Super Bowl buy. It was available before the IPO. The sock puppet survived. The math did not. 13. Webvan was right. That is the uncomfortable part. The model of automated warehouse fulfillment for same-day grocery delivery is the model that Instacart, Amazon Fresh, and DoorDash now operate at scale and profitability. Webvan had the correct idea. What Webvan had in addition to the correct idea was a $1 billion contract with Bechtel to construct massive automated warehouse facilities across multiple American cities, signed before the company had proven the business model worked in a single market. Webvan raised $375 million in its 1999 IPO and secured $1 billion from investors including Goldman Sachs and SoftBank. They built the infrastructure for the future before the consumers, the smartphones, and the digital payment systems that make rapid grocery delivery commercially viable actually existed. When the company filed for bankruptcy in July 2001, it had burned through approximately $1.2 billion and laid off 2,000 employees. The idea worked. The timing was a billion-dollar miscalculation. 15 to 20 years separated Webvan's collapse from the profitable arrival of the model it pioneered. Being correct about the future is not the same as being correct about when. $1 billion is the invoice for learning that distinction the hard way. 14. In 1989, the Dean drive was at least honest about its age. Norman Dean filed patents for his reactionless thrust device in the 1950s, claiming that rotating eccentric weights inside a mechanical housing could generate directional thrust without any reaction mass, movement without pushing against anything, propulsion without fuel, a machine that simply decided to go forward and went. This violates Newton's third law of motion, which Isaac Newton published in 1687 and which has not been successfully contested since. The influential editor of Astounding Science Fiction championed the Dean drive enthusiastically in print, lending it credibility in scientific and engineering communities that the physics did not support. When physicists examined the device, they concluded the apparent thrust was caused by asymmetric friction. The device moved differently in different directions due to mechanical bias, not reactionless propulsion. It was a measurement artifact. Newton was still right. Investors and imitators nonetheless pursued variants of the reactionless drive concept for decades. The most recent major iteration, the M drive, was tested by NASA, and peer-reviewed studies found it produced no significant thrust. The third law was published in 1687. Your machine disagreed with it. Newton published his rebuttal 300 years before you filed the patent. The filing was not competitive. 15. The pheromone fragrance market generates hundreds of millions in annual global revenue on a premise that peer-reviewed science has declined to confirm. Products marketed as containing synthesized human pheromones, compounds that would trigger involuntary attraction in anyone nearby, have been sold under dozens of brand names including Realm and Erox, with the core promise that chemistry could substitute for personality in social situations. The mechanism requires a functional human vomeronasal organ, which processes pheromones in many other mammals but is vestigial in adult humans, not connected to the brain's olfactory or behavioral centers in a way that produces the claimed response. A 2017 meta-analysis published in Royal Society Open Science reviewed 32 studies on androstatinin, the most commonly marketed pheromone compound, and found no consistent evidence of attraction, triggering effects in human subjects under controlled conditions. The studies existed. The journals published them. The market continued generating hundreds of millions in revenue from consumers purchasing bottled attraction based on a biological mechanism that does not function in adults the way the marketing requires it to function. You bought the bottle. Your vomeronasal organ, which has not been functionally connected to your behavior since you were an infant, did not receive the memo. Neither did anyone at the party. 16. Nikola Corporation went public in June 2020 via SPACI merger and briefly achieved a market capitalization exceeding $34 billion, surpassing Ford Motor Company in valuation, despite having generated zero revenue. The company's name was a clever split between two giants of electrical engineering. The investors responded to the branding and the vision. Then in September 2020, short seller firm Hindenburg Research published a report alleging widespread fraud, including the claim that a 2018 promotional video titled Nikola One in Motion, showing the company's flagship hydrogen electric semi-truck apparently driving under its own power, was filmed by towing the non-functional vehicle to the top of a hill and rolling it down. The truck was not running. It was falling. Founder Trevor Milton resigned days after the Hindenburg report. He was indicted in 2021 and convicted in October 2022 on 3 counts of fraud. The company did eventually produce a small number of battery electric trucks and continues operating under new leadership, at a valuation that is a fraction of its peak. $34 billion for a truck that needed a hill to simulate motion. The hill was load-bearing. The entire business case was gravity. 17. Rick Huntz invented the Flowbee in 1988, and by the mid-90s it had generated approximately $14 million in cumulative infomercial sales by promising salon-quality haircuts through a device that attached to your household vacuum cleaner. The suction held hair at a set length while a blade trimmed it. This is the complete description of the mechanism. It attached to a vacuum cleaner. The vacuum was already in your home. The Flowbee was the accessory. The product technically functions as marketed. The mechanism is real. The trim is real. The suction does what suction does, which makes it different from outright fraud and places it instead in the category of products the market rejected, not because they didn't work, but because the market looked at the product and made a decision about the kind of person who puts a vacuum cleaner on their head. The concept of vacuum-assisted home haircutting as a mass-market replacement for professional salons is where the investment myth lives. The Flowbee experienced a genuine viral resurgence during pandemic lockdowns in 2020, briefly selling out, which is either a vindication or a data point about what 4 months without a haircut does to a person's relationship with their dignity. The machine worked. The market had opinions about the machine. 18. Learnout and Housepie was the darling of 1990s technology investment, a Belgian speech recognition company valued at approximately $10 billion at its peak, partnered with Microsoft and Intel, championed by serious institutional money as the dominant platform for human-computer voice interaction. The company's revenues were growing at a rate that impressed everyone who looked at the numbers. The problem was that the numbers were invented. A Wall Street Journal investigation in 2000 revealed that Learnout and Housepie's reported revenues from South Korea were fabricated. The customers either did not exist or had revenues that bore no relationship to the figures being reported. The fraud totaled approximately $370 million in manufactured sales. The company filed for bankruptcy in October 2000. Co-founders Joe Learnout and Paul Housepie were convicted of fraud in Belgium. Microsoft lost a partnership, Dragon Systems, which had agreed to merge with Learnout and Housepie and turned down an acquisition offer from a competitor to do so, absorbed catastrophic losses when the fraud was revealed and the merger collapsed. Thousands of investors lost everything. $10 billion in market value, sitting on top of $370 million in customers who did not exist. The customers were fictional. The losses were the most real thing in the entire company. 19. The telectroscope was a Victorian-era vision so compelling that serious investors handed over real money for a device that would transmit live visual images from London to New York through a physical tunnel beneath the Atlantic Ocean. A tunnel that did not exist, powered by technology that had not been invented, producing images through a mechanism that no working prototype had ever demonstrated. Multiple inventors filed patents and raised investment in the 1870s through 1890s for variations of this concept, predating working television by decades. Jules Verne and other cultural figures referenced the telectroscope as an inevitable technology, lending it the credibility of imagination rather than engineering. Jan Szczepanik, a Polish inventor, received significant investment and press coverage in the 1890s for a telectroscope that contemporary engineers noted could not function as described by its own specifications. The Victorian investment community responded to the confidence of the pitch rather than the viability of the physics. A 2008 art installation finally delivered the promise, placing telescope-shaped objects in London and New York connected by a live video feed. As an art project, 130 years late, requiring no tunnel and no impossible technology. The Victorians funded the tunnel. The artist needed a camera. 20. Enron Corporation reported revenues of approximately $101 billion in the year 2000 and was valued at over $70 billion, making it a top 10 American company by market capitalization. The 7th largest company in America. The company used mark-to-market accounting to book projected future profits from long-term contracts as immediate revenue, and deployed hundreds of special-purpose entities to hide debt off its balance sheet. The profits were real on paper. The paper was the product. When Enron disclosed accounting irregularities in October 2001, the stock collapsed from a high of $90.75 to under $1 within weeks. It filed the largest bankruptcy in United States history at that time in December 2001. CEO Jeff Skilling was convicted of fraud and conspiracy and sentenced to 24 years, later reduced. Founder Ken Lay was convicted before dying of a heart attack prior to sentencing. Accounting firm Arthur Andersen, one of the largest in the world, was effectively destroyed by its role in auditing a company whose books said the opposite of reality. The 7th largest company in America. The entire 7th floor was a spreadsheet that meant the opposite of what it said. The auditors signed it anyway. 21. At the peak of the low-carbohydrate diet revolution in 2003, Atkins Nutritionals was generating approximately $100 million in annual revenue selling branded food products, books, and supplements to a population that had decided carbohydrates were the enemy. 9% of North Americans were reportedly following some form of low-carb eating. The company invested heavily in manufacturing and distribution of branded products at exactly the moment consumer interest peaked and began declining. Because diet trends behave like all trends. They crest, and then the people who were most enthusiastic move on to the next certainty. By 2004, low-carb product sales industry-wide had dropped by double-digit percentages. Atkins Nutritionals filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in July 2005 with $325 million in debt. 2 years after Dr. Atkins himself died, and approximately 2 years after the trend that built the company had begun reversing. The company emerged from bankruptcy, was sold, and was sold again. A version continues operating. It has never recaptured the scale of its early 2000s peak. You built a $100 million company on a diet trend and structured the business as though the trend was permanent. The carbohydrate outlasted the stock price. It always does. 22. Yahoo acquired Broadcast.com in July 1999 for $5.7 billion in Yahoo stock. At the time, an all-time record for an internet acquisition. Broadcast.com had been founded by Mark Cuban and Todd Wagner as AudioNet in 1995 and went public in 1998, with the stock rising from $18 to $62.75 on the first day of trading. It was streaming audio and video on the internet. Yahoo paid $5.7 billion for it. Mark Cuban received Yahoo stock and immediately began hedging his position using equity collars, protecting his payout before Yahoo's stock declined. This is the information. This was always the information. Yahoo shut down Broadcast.com in 2002. The streaming infrastructure and audience did not generate meaningful ongoing value for a company that paid nearly $6 billion for them. Streaming audio eventually became a multi-billion-dollar industry through Spotify, Apple Music, and others, roughly 15 years after this acquisition, and not through Yahoo. Cuban walked away with his billions intact because he understood what he had sold the moment he sold it. $5.7 billion. The founder hedged on day one. That hedge was the review. 23. Microsoft spent 2 years and approximately $1 billion acquiring and developing a phone specifically designed for social media native teenagers, a demographic that was, at the time, among the most active mobile phone users on the planet. The Kin 1 and Kin 2 launched in May 2010 on Verizon's network. They required a $30 per month smartphone data plan. They ran no third-party applications. There was no app store. There were dramatically fewer features than competing smartphones selling at the same price point. Microsoft had acquired Danger Incorporated, maker of the beloved Sidekick phone, for approximately $500 million in 2008 as the foundation for the project. The product launched. Microsoft sold approximately 503 units in 48 days before discontinuing the device in July 2010. The phones were returned to inventory and later sold at steep discount through prepaid channels. The failure is widely attributed to an internal conflict between the Kin team and the Windows Phone team, which refused to share its application ecosystem, leaving the Kin with smartphone pricing and no software reason to exist. $1 billion, 48 days, 503 units. The teenager looked at a phone with no apps and said no. That is the complete product review. 24. Amazon launched the Fire Phone in July 2014 at $199 with a 2-year contract, the same price as an iPhone, and with exclusive availability through AT&T. The phone featured dynamic perspective, a 3-dimensional display effect achieved through front-facing cameras and head tracking that created a parallax illusion on the screen. Reviews described it as gimmicky and battery-intensive. The broader app ecosystem was narrower than competitors. The phone was designed, at its core, around Amazon shopping convenience rather than broad consumer utility. A device built to benefit Amazon's retail platform more than the person holding it. Amazon took a $170 million write-down in the third quarter of 2014 on Fire Phone hardware and inventory. The device was discontinued in August 2015. The world's most successful retailer built a phone whose primary purpose was to make it easier to shop from the world's most successful retailer, priced it identically to the competition, gave it a gimmick that drained the battery, and then wrote down $170 million in unsold units. The shopping recommendation engine could not sell the shopping phone. The irony was not subtle. The write-down was not subtle either. 25. The original XFL launched on February 3, 2001, with a first broadcast that drew 54 million viewers. A genuinely strong debut for a brand new football league built on the premise that Vince McMahon, the architect of professional wrestling's global dominance, could apply entertainment spectacle to the sport and out-engage the NFL. Cameras in the huddle, cheerleaders with expanded roles, player nicknames on jerseys. He was going to reinvent the sport. NBC and the World Wrestling Federation jointly invested approximately $35 million. The opening broadcast achieved a 9.5 Nielsen rating. By week 3, the rating had collapsed to 1.6 and continued falling. Audiences and critics found the football quality below NFL standards, while the entertainment editions felt like theater applied to a game that already had its own drama. The promised access and personality failed to compensate for mediocre on-field play. By week 8, the audience had reached 1.5 million viewers. NBC canceled the season. Both NBC and the WWF absorbed approximately $35 million in losses. McMahon relaunched the XFL in 2020 with significantly more realistic expectations, and that version was ended prematurely by COVID-19 shutdowns. 54 million people watched the first game and changed the channel by week 3. The future lasted 8 weeks. 26. Smell-O-Vision was used in exactly one film, Scent of Mystery, released in 1960 by producer Mike Todd Jr., who invested heavily in Hans Laub's technology and its commercial future on the strength of a concept that sounded, on paper, like an obvious extension of the cinematic experience. The system pumped 30 distinct odors through tubes installed beneath each individual theater seat, triggered by a soundtrack signal synchronized to on-screen events. The delivery timing varied significantly depending on where you were sitting. Audiences in different parts of the theater smelled different things at different moments. Critics savaged both the technology and the film. A competing system called Aroma-Rama, which distributed scents through theater air conditioning during a documentary the same year, received similarly catastrophic reviews. Neither system was ever used commercially again. The foundational engineering problem is that smell does not travel at the speed of film. The person in row 20 received the horse smell approximately 30 seconds after the person in row 2, creating not an immersive sensory experience, but a confused, lingering chemical fog that did not correspond to what was happening on screen. You installed plumbing beneath every seat to deliver a smell that arrived late to the people who needed it most. Nobody requested a sequel to the plumbing. 27. Trump University was not a university. It had no academic accreditation. It could not issue degrees. New York State education officials prohibited it from using the word university, and it ignored them for years. The institution operated from 2004 to 2010, selling seminars and mentorship programs ranging from $1,500 to $35,000, collecting approximately $40 million from roughly 7,000 students who paid for what was marketed as insider expertise from a nationally recognized real estate brand. The New York Attorney General's investigation found that instructors were selected based on their sales performance rather than their real estate knowledge. The exclusive mentors were often entry-level contractors. The proven methods were a pitch. Multiple lawsuits were filed by former students alleging deceptive practices. In November 2016, then President-elect Trump settled 3 class action lawsuits for $25 million without admitting wrongdoing. $40 million in tuition paid to a school that was not a school, taught by instructors hired for their ability to sell rather than their knowledge of the subject being sold. The diploma was a metaphor. The expertise was a marketing claim. The $25 million settlement arrived after the school had been closed for 6 years. The students graduated into a lawsuit. 28. John DeLorean left General Motors and raised over $200 million, including approximately £84 million from the British government seeking economic development in Northern Ireland to build the ultimate sports car. Gull wing doors, stainless steel body panels, an engine sourced from Peugeot Renault Volvo, and a design that looked like the future. The DMC-12 launched in 1981 with a 130 horsepower engine in a car weighing 2,800 pounds. Underpowered by contemporary sports car standards, a detail that reviewers noticed immediately. The stainless steel body panels scratched visibly on contact with anything and could not be painted if you changed your mind about the silver. Build quality was inconsistent. Approximately 9,000 units were produced before the company went into receivership in 1982. DeLorean was arrested in an FBI sting operation involving cocaine in October of that year and acquitted in 1984 on entrapment grounds. $200 million. A cocaine arrest. Mediocre performance reviews. And then Robert Zemeckis put one in a time machine in 1985, and the car became immortal. Without Back to the Future, this is simply an expensive stainless steel miscalculation with doors that open upward. The movie saved the legacy. The movie was not in the business plan. 29. Clive Sinclair had genuine credibility. The ZX Spectrum home computer had made him a household name in British technology. He understood consumer electronics. He understood mass market pricing. In January of 1985, he launched the C5, an open-air electric tricycle with a top speed of 15 miles per hour, a range of approximately 20 miles, a seated position roughly at bumper height of surrounding traffic, and a price of £399. He launched it in January. In Britain, the decision to debut an open-air, driver-exposed, road-legal electric vehicle in one of the coldest and wettest months of the calendar year, in a country defined by cold and wet weather, was noted immediately by the press, who climbed into the demonstration units at the launch event, got rained on, and produced headlines that required very little embellishment. Approximately 5,000 units were sold against projections of hundreds of thousands. The Sinclair Vehicles Company folded within months. The Automobile Association publicly warned against using the product on public roads due to its low height, making it invisible to truck and bus drivers. The Weather gave the product review that the launch event provided no defense against. It was January, in Britain. The forecast was available before the launch date was chosen. 30. Bell Aerosystems demonstrated a working personal jetpack at the 1964 World's Fair, and again at the opening ceremony of the 1984 Olympic Games. And each time the demonstration produced the same conclusion among investors and futurists. Personal flight for commuters was approximately 20 years away. The device used hydrogen peroxide propellant and achieved a maximum flight duration of 21 seconds. Not 21 minutes. 21 seconds. That limitation, the product of fundamental propulsion chemistry that has proven extraordinarily difficult to extend, has remained stubbornly resistant to 60 years of investment and engineering effort across dozens of companies. The Martin jetpack raised investment and demonstrated a ducted fan prototype in New Zealand, capable of longer flight times before the company entered receivership in 2019 after failing to reach commercial viability. Jetpack Aviation, JB-10, and others have raised additional rounds on similar promises, with similar timelines. No consumer jetpack market exists. Aviation regulators in most jurisdictions have not established a legal framework for personal jetpack use in populated airspace, meaning the engineering problem and the legal problem remain simultaneously unsolved by the same investment that has been promising resolution for 6 decades. 20 years away. The announcement was made in 1964. The math has not improved. 31, at the peak of the Beanie Baby market from approximately 1996 to 1999, Thai Inc. generated approximately $1.4 billion in revenue in 1998 alone, and millions of people were storing small stuffed animals in clear acrylic cases, cataloging serial numbers, and tracking secondary market prices on eBay with the same seriousness they applied to stock portfolios. The mechanism was deliberate. Time Warner announced retirements and limited editions to manufacture scarcity, driving speculative purchasing among consumers with no prior history of collectible investment, who had been convinced by community consensus that prices would rise permanently. On eBay, rare or retired models traded for thousands of dollars. The secondary market had all the vocabulary of investment and none of the underlying fundamentals. When new buyers stopped entering the market, as they always eventually do, the prices collapsed almost entirely. A 2015 CNN feature documented multiple collectors who had invested tens of thousands of dollars in Beanie Babies, now unable to sell their entire collections for more than a few $100s total. You kept a stuffed animal in a plastic case for 20 years as a retirement strategy. The retirement came. The stuffed animal is still $6. The acrylic case cost more than the asset inside it. 32. The pheromone spray market has a companion in the outdoor survival aisle. Aerosol products marketed as predator deterrents, containing synthesized fear pheromones or predator urine compounds, sold with the claim that spraying a perimeter around your campsite will chemically communicate danger to bears, mountain lions, and other large predators, convincing them to avoid the area through biological instinct. Multiple products in this category were sold through mainstream outdoor retailers in the 1990s and 2000s, generating significant revenue from backcountry campers and hunters who reasonably wanted a reliable deterrent. The mechanism claimed requires large carnivores to be primarily pheromone-driven in a way that controlled field research has not confirmed. Bear spray, oleoresin, capsicum, the same active compound as law enforcement pepper spray, works through direct contact with mucous membranes, and a 2008 study in the Journal of Wildlife Management documented it stopping aggressive bear behavior in 92% of encounters. No comparable peer-reviewed study exists for perimeter fear scent products. The U.S. Forest Service and National Park Service recommend bear spray. Neither agency recommends spraying synthesized fear around your tent. You paid for chemistry theater. The bear approached the perimeter and was not informed it was supposed to stop there. 33. Thai Beanie Babies had already proven that a stuffed collectible market could generate $1 billion and collapse completely. The XFL had already shown that entertainment repackaging of an existing sport draws a large opening audience and a vanishing one by week 8. And yet, in the same tradition of betting on enthusiasm before examining the structure underneath it, in 1999, an online toy retailer called eToys achieved a market capitalization of approximately $11 billion, exceeding the valuation of Toys R Us, which had physical stores, real inventory, established supplier relationships, and actual revenue, on the basis that the internet was going to transform toy retail and eToys was going to lead the transformation. The stock rose from $20 to $85 on its first day of trading. Then came the 1999 holiday season, eToys' first major commercial test, in which the company was unable to fulfill a significant portion of its orders, with packages arriving late or not at all. The company took out newspaper advertisements apologizing to customers. It filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in March 2001 with approximately $247 million in debt. $11 billion, more than Toys R Us. The toys did not arrive. Valuation is a prediction. The prediction required logistics that did not exist. 34. Magic Leap raised approximately $2.6 billion from investors including Google, Alibaba, and Andreessen Horowitz between 2014 and 2018, generating one of the most sustained and aggressive hype cycles in recent technology history. The company released concept videos, including a widely circulated clip appearing to show a digital whale breaching from a gymnasium floor in front of a crowd of spectators, that were later confirmed to be pre-rendered concept animations rather than demonstrations of what the actual device could do. When the Magic Leap 1 consumer headset launched in August 2018 at $2,295, reviewers found the field of view approximately 40 degrees, significantly narrower than the Microsoft HoloLens competitor, and dramatically narrower than the gymnasium whale video had implied. The content library was thin. The experience was not cinematic. The whale was not there. Magic Leap pivoted to enterprise sales in 2020, laying off approximately 1,000 employees, about half its workforce, and sold off assets to restructure. $2.6 billion. The whale was a render. The device showed a laptop-sized rectangle floating in front of your face. The gymnasium was never involved. The investors were always involved. The whale existed only as a file on a server. 35. The Concorde entered service in 1976, crossing the Atlantic in under 3.5 hours. And the conclusion drawn by the aviation industry, investors, and futurists was unanimous. Supersonic passenger travel was the obvious future of commercial aviation, and would become the standard experience within a generation. The reasoning seemed sound. The technology existed. The market for speed among premium travelers was real. What the reasoning missed was the complete set of constraints that made the Concorde economically impossible to scale. Development costs shared between the British and French governments totaled approximately £1.3 billion, equivalent to over £20 billion today, for a plane that carried 100 passengers per flight. Sonic boom regulations prevented supersonic flight over populated landmasses, confining routes almost exclusively to transatlantic corridors. Only 20 Concordes were ever built, 14 of which entered commercial service. Only 2 airlines ever operated it commercially, and both received their aircraft at below-cost prices because of government pressure. The aircraft was retired in 2003 following a crash and declining premium travel demand. The future of aviation for everyone turned out to be the future of aviation for approximately 100 people per flight, on 2 routes, operated by 2 airlines that needed a subsidy to make the math work. 36. Boom Supersonic was founded in 2014 with the explicit goal of delivering what Concorde had promised, but failed to make commercially viable: a next-generation supersonic passenger jet that modern materials and engine technology would finally make economically sustainable. The company raised approximately $700 million, received pre-orders from United Airlines for 15 aircraft and American Airlines for 20 aircraft, and published timelines for its Overture full-scale aircraft that the press repeated with the confidence the funding numbers seemed to justify. The sonic boom problem that grounded Concorde over populated landmasses has not been solved for commercial aircraft. Fuel efficiency at supersonic speeds requires burning approximately 5 to 7 times more fuel per passenger mile than subsonic widebody jets, a calculation that makes ticket pricing extremely difficult to reconcile with any market broader than the one Concorde already failed to sustain. Ariane Supersonic, a competitor that raised hundreds of millions and announced an $11.2 billion order backlog, shut down entirely in May 2021 after Boeing ended its manufacturing partnership and the company could not secure sufficient additional capital. Boom's XB-1 demonstrator completed early test flights in 2024. The full-scale Overture has not been built. $700 million. One small test plane. The sonic boom is still illegal over land. 37. The Amazon Dash button was a physical branded button, roughly the size of a USB drive, that you stuck to a surface in your home and pressed when you were running low on a specific product, automatically reordering it from Amazon. Procter & Gamble invested in the platform. Tide had a button. Bounty had a button. At peak, over 100 brand-specific buttons were available. Consumer packaged goods companies paid Amazon for placement. The concept attracted genuine enthusiasm from analysts who described it as the future of household replenishment. A German consumer court ruled in 2019 that Dash buttons violated European Union consumer protection laws because they did not display current prices before confirming purchases, potentially allowing substitution of more expensive alternatives without clear disclosure. Usage data suggested that most households that received the buttons pressed them fewer than 3 times total after the initial novelty. Amazon's own Subscribe and Save automatic reorder feature and Alexa voice ordering accomplish the same replenishment function without requiring a physical button stuck to your laundry room wall. Amazon discontinued the service in 2019. Germany made it illegal. Amazon's own subscription service made it redundant. The button lasted 4 years. The button was a solution to a problem that Amazon had already solved in a different part of the same app. 38. MoviePass offered unlimited movie tickets at any theater in America for $9.95 per month. The service grew from 20,000 members to approximately 3 million members within a year of cutting the price in 2017, after data analytics company Helios and Matheson Analytics acquired it and slashed the price as a subscriber acquisition strategy. The plan was to monetize user data and leverage the audience to negotiate bulk deals with studios. The unit economics made this plan impossible before it started. MoviePass paid theaters full retail ticket prices, averaging approximately $12 to $15 per admission, for every ticket its subscribers used, while charging those subscribers $9.95 per month. Any subscriber who attended one movie per month made the company a loss on the transaction. A subscriber who attended 4 movies per month was a catastrophe in a bucket of popcorn. The company ran out of cash multiple times, temporarily freezing the debit cards it used to fund ticket purchases at theater point-of-sale terminals. Helios and Matheson's stock declined from approximately $32 to under 1 cent over 18 months. MoviePass shut down in September 2019. You charged $10 for a product that cost $15. 3 million customers showed up. The math was always visible. Nobody in the room checked the math. 39. Nintendo launched the Virtual Boy in August 1995 in Japan and the United States at $179.95, projecting sales of 1.5 to 2 million units in the first year. The device produced graphics exclusively in red and black because the technology to render full-color stereo displays at the target price point did not exist in 1995. The device could not be held like a Game Boy. The eyepiece required precise alignment with the user's face, and the company shipped it with a stand that required the player to sit at a table and look into a visor while holding a separate controller, eliminating the portable, play anywhere identity that had defined Nintendo's handheld brand for nearly a decade. Users reported headaches and eye discomfort after short play sessions. Total global lifetime sales reached approximately 770,000 units against the 2 million unit first-year projection. Nintendo discontinued the Virtual Boy in 1996 after less than 1 year on the market, never releasing it in Europe or Australia, and no Nintendo executive has spoken positively about the product publicly since. Nintendo built a portable console that required a stand displayed only red, and reliably gave users a headache in 15 minutes. The portability was an intention. The headache was the consistent deliverable. 40. Between 2017 and 2019, blockchain technology was simultaneously declared the inevitable disruption of banking, supply chain, healthcare, voting, real estate, insurance, and identity systems. Every major corporation launched a blockchain initiative. Consulting firms billed billions for blockchain strategy documents. The word itself became a valuation multiplier. Companies that added blockchain to their business descriptions saw stock prices respond before the technology had been deployed to do anything. Global enterprise blockchain investment reached approximately $11.7 billion in 2022, up from the initial wave, but with a dramatically lower proportion of announced projects reaching meaningful commercial production. IBM's Food Trust blockchain for grocery supply chain tracking was one of the highest profile deployments. Multiple major retailers quietly reduced involvement by 2021 to 22. Maersk and IBM's TradeLens shipping platform was described as revolutionary at its 2018 launch and shut down in November 2022 after failing to achieve industry-wide adoption. The fundamental problem: blockchain provides a trustless, decentralized ledger for transacting without a trusted intermediary. Most enterprise use cases already had trusted intermediaries and did not need the solution blockchain provided. $11 billion to build trustless systems for industries that already trusted each other. The solution was functional. The problem it solved was not the problem anyone had. 41. Storn Limited placed a full-page advertisement in The Economist in August 2006, announcing it had developed a technology that produces free, clean, and constant energy, and inviting the world's scientists to scrutinize its Orbo device, a machine that claimed to produce more energy than it consumed, which would require the laws of thermodynamics to be wrong. Investors responded. A jury of 22 scientists assembled by Storn to evaluate the Orbo concluded in June 2009 that they found no evidence of energy production by the technology and could not support the free energy claim. The 2007 live demonstration at the Connecticut Museum in London was cancelled when the device stopped working during setup, attributed to excessive heat from the museum's lighting affecting bearing friction, which is either a remarkable coincidence or the most convenient explanation available. Storn raised approximately 23 million euros before winding down in 2016. A final consumer product, the Orbo PowerCube USB charger, was briefly sold and found by independent testers to contain a standard rechargeable battery with a logo on the housing, 23 million euros. The machine stopped when someone turned on the lights. The final product was a battery in a box. Thermodynamics remained unimpressed from the first advertisement to the last refund. 42. Microsoft introduced Clipit, universally called Clippy, in Office 97 as a context-aware animated assistant that would monitor your typing and proactively offer help based on pattern recognition. It was positioned as the future of human-computer interaction. Personality-driven, anticipatory, always present. If you began typing "dear" at the start of a document, Clippy would appear and ask if you needed help writing a letter. The letter was fine. Clippy's arrival was not solicited. A widely cited internal Microsoft study found that female users in particular found the character patronizing and untrustworthy. A Stanford University study on interface design found that users attributed negative personality traits to Clippy at rates significantly higher than other interface elements, making it a documented case study in how proactive personality-driven UI can actively damage user experience rather than enhance it. Microsoft disabled Clippy by default in Office 2002 and removed it entirely in Office 2007. When the company finally killed the character, it ran a mock farewell campaign, acknowledging the failure as though the acknowledgement were charming rather than a decade late. Clippy has since been rehabilitated as a mascot for terrible UX design, which is a form of legacy, just not the one anyone invested in building. The future of human-computer interaction interrupted you to ask if you were writing a letter. You were. It didn't help. 43. Sony launched the minidisc in 1992 after a reported development investment exceeding $500 million, positioning it as the successor to the cassette tape for portable audio recording and playback. The format offered genuine technical advantages over the cassette: digital quality, random access, a durable protective casing. And Sony committed enormous manufacturing and marketing resources to its commercial success across multiple decades. Minidisc achieved meaningful adoption in Japan, reaching approximately 15 to 20% of the portable audio market at peak. In North America and Europe, the cassette maintained dominance until MP3 players emerged and made the question of which physical format would replace it largely irrelevant. The format's structural problem was compatibility. Minidisc could not be played in a CD player, which was already in most homes and cars. Sony's proprietary digital rights management required special software for computer transfers, making Minidisc incompatible with the emerging digital music ecosystem at exactly the moment that ecosystem was defining consumer behavior. Sony discontinued Minidisc production in 2013, 21 years after launch. Total investment, including recording studios, manufacturing infrastructure, and inventory write-offs, is estimated to exceed $1 billion. 21 years, $1 billion. The MP3 arrived, moved in, repainted, and changed the locks. The format that replaced the cassette was not a disc. It was a file. 44. Cosmo.com launched in New York City in 1998 with a promise to deliver any item, books, movies, snacks, pharmacy products, to any urban address within 1 hour, for free, with no minimum order. Amazon invested $60 million. The company raised approximately $280 million total and expanded to 9 United States cities on the strength of a model that lost money on every transaction by design. The company's average order value was reportedly around $11. The fully burdened cost of each delivery, courier wages, benefits, vehicle costs, warehouse overhead, and product cost, was estimated by analysts at significantly more than $11 per order. When Cosmo attempted to resolve this by introducing a delivery fee in 2000, the customers who had joined specifically because delivery was free left. The company shut down in 2001. The concept that Cosmo pioneered, rapid urban delivery of consumer goods, is now operated profitably by DoorDash, GoPuff, and Instacart at economics that work because smartphone coordination technology reduced dispatch costs, and labor classification changed cost structures. Cosmo ran the correct model 20 years before the infrastructure existed to support it. $280 million is the invoice for being right about the future and wrong about when the future was scheduled to arrive. 45. In the year 2001, a company called DigiSense had already failed trying to make the internet smell. The lesson was available. It was documented. It had been named one of the worst tech products of its era. In 2017, Google and Levi's introduced Project Jacquard, a $350 denim jacket with conductive yarn woven into the cuff, allowing the wearer to tap the fabric to control a connected smartphone. Skip a song, check the time, answer a call. The technology was real. The yarn conducted. The gestures registered. The jacket received substantial press coverage and was described as the beginning of smart clothing as a consumer category. It was quietly discontinued in 2023. The smart clothing investment wave that accompanied it, dozens of startups raising venture capital for biometric athletic shirts, connected yoga pants with haptic feedback, heated performance outerwear with app-controlled temperature zones, produced a global market that reached approximately $1.2 billion in 2022, roughly 24% of the $5 billion that analysts had projected. Most of the startups that attracted significant investment have shut down or pivoted. The problem is consistent. Electronics and clothing must survive a washing machine. which costs more to solve than the consumer is willing to pay. The jacket conducted. The washing machine disagreed. 46. In April 2020, a streaming platform called Quibi launched with $1.75 billion raised before a single piece of content was available to a paying subscriber. The platform was built exclusively for smartphones, offering premium short-form video content in segments of 10 minutes or less, designed for consumption during commutes, lunch breaks, and the moments between other activities. Jeffrey Katzenberg and Meg Whitman led the company. Every major Hollywood studio had sold content to it. The launch date was April of 2020, the month that COVID-19 lockdowns sent the entire population home to sit in front of their largest available screens with nowhere to go and nothing to do except consume entertainment. The platform could not be cast to a television. Content could not be screenshotted for sharing on social media. There were no social features of any kind. The mechanisms that drive organic content discovery did not exist within the product. Quibi attracted 910,000 subscribers against a target of 7.4 million and shut down 6 months after launch. Jeffrey Katzenberg attributed the failure to the pandemic. Independent analysis noted that a platform built for mobile consumption that couldn't play on TV had a product problem independent of where its users were sitting. $1.75 billion. 6 months. You cannot screenshot the lesson either. 47. The Bricklin SV1 was a sports car with gull-wing doors, a stainless steel and acrylic body, and approximately 84 million pounds of British Columbian, New Brunswick Provincial, government backing secured by Malcolm Bricklin, who convinced Canadian officials that locating production in their region was an economic development opportunity worth significant public investment. The acrylic body panels were a novel material choice that proved highly susceptible to temperature. They warped in summer heat and became brittle in winter cold, which in a car sold primarily in North America meant the body panels were unreliable in approximately 8 months of the year across most of the continent. The gull-wing doors operated on electric motors and required the car to be reasonably level to function. There were no external door handles. If the battery died, you were inside the car. Approximately 2,897 units were produced before the company declared bankruptcy in 1975. The $23 million government investment was lost. Surviving Bricklins are now collector items valued for historical curiosity, which is the automotive equivalent of a participation trophy. $23 million from a provincial government. A car whose body changed shape in summer. Doors that required electricity and a level surface to open. The market reviewed all 3 of these features simultaneously and produced a bankruptcy. 48. In 1989, 2 chemists held a press conference to announce cold fusion. That story is item 4 on this list. What is less frequently told is what happened next. A laboratory funded by Toyota's affiliate Teknova, established in Sophia Antipolis, France, beginning in 1992, allowed Stanley Ponce and Martin Fleischmann to continue their cold fusion research with a reported budget of approximately $12 million over several years, because Toyota believed the experiment might be real and was willing to pay to find out. The laboratory operated until approximately 1997 to 1998 without producing published results that satisfied mainstream physics standards or could be independently replicated by any external laboratory. Ponce largely withdrew from public scientific life after the project ended. Fleischmann died in 2012, maintaining belief in cold fusion to the end of his life despite the absence of accepted experimental confirmation from any source other than his original, unrepeatable experiment. Toyota's investment represents one of the most significant institutional commitments to cold fusion research by a major corporation, and its quiet termination without published positive results is among the most consequential institutional rejections of the premise in the concept's history. $12 million. 5 years. The jar still did not work. Toyota stopped funding the jar. The jar remains, to this day, unconvincing. 49. The Apple Newton Message Pad launched in August 1993 at $699, approximately $1,400 in today's terms, as Apple's first major post-Jobs product initiative under CEO John Sculley, promising to eliminate the keyboard by recognizing natural handwriting through a stylus interface in real time. The handwriting recognition engine was unreliable in a way that was not random but consistent. It produced the same types of errors repeatedly, which meant that reviewers, cartoonists, and satirists could reproduce specific failure modes on demand for comedic effect. Gary Trudeau's Doonesbury ran multiple strips mocking the Newton's recognition failures. The Simpsons featured a sustained parody in a 1994 episode. The errors were famous enough to be repeatable. Apple continued developing the Newton platform through 1997 until Steve Jobs returned to the company and discontinued it as one of his first decisions. Not because the handwriting concept was wrong, but because the execution was not ready, and the market had been telling Apple that for 4 years, with Doonesbury strips. The input concept was eventually vindicated by the iPhone's touchscreen in 2007, 14 years later. When your product's failure is consistent enough that cartoonists can reliably reproduce specific error messages for comedic effect, the handwriting is on the wall. The Newton just couldn't read it. 50. eToys appeared in item 33 on this list as the toy retailer that achieved an $11 billion valuation and couldn't ship the toys. But the pattern it represents: a dot-com era company structurally incapable of the thing its valuation assumed, finds its most expensive expression in Webvan, which was right about everything except when. Pets.com was item 12, wrong about the unit economics. Webvan was item 13, right about the model, wrong about the timing by 15 years and $1 billion. The pattern these three companies share is not stupidity. The people involved were not foolish. The pattern is the systematic mispricing of timing risk. The assumption that a correct vision of the future has a predictable arrival date that can be funded toward. The internet grocery market Webvan built for did arrive. The internet toy market eToys built for did arrive. The rapid urban delivery market Cosmo built for did arrive. All of them arrived 15 to 20 years after the infrastructure, consumer behavior, and smartphone coordination technology required to make them work at unit economics that don't require burning through $1 billion. Being right about the destination is not the same as being right about the departure time. The $1 billion is what happens when you confuse the two. 51. The Halo Sport neurostimulation headset launched in 2016 at $749, with marketing claims describing a process called neuropriming, applying transcranial direct current stimulation to the motor cortex before training to accelerate skill acquisition. The U.S. Olympic ski team, the Golden State Warriors, and the U.S. Army were cited as customers and beta testers, lending the product institutional credibility that the peer-reviewed research base could not independently support at the claimed effect size. A 2021 meta-analysis published in the European Journal of Sports Science reviewed 24 studies on transcranial direct current stimulation and athletic performance, and found no statistically significant, consistent improvement across motor tasks. The effect that the product was built around, the core mechanism that justified the $749 price point, was not confirmed at meaningful scale by independent research. Halo Neuroscience shut down in 2019 before the meta-analysis was published. The founders pivoted to a new company focused on consumer audio products, headphones that do not claim to improve your motor cortex. $749 to run electrical current through your skull before exercise. The Olympics did not notice a difference. The motor cortex received the current and declined to file a performance report in either direction. 52. The personal jetpack has a companion myth in the flying car, a concept so persistently funded, so repeatedly announced as imminent, and so comprehensively undelivered that its investment history reads like a generational relay race, where each runner hands the baton to the next with the same confident promise that the finish line is just ahead. The Aero car, developed by Moulton Taylor in the 1950s, received a production order from Ford that was ultimately canceled, and only 6 units were ever built, the closest the concept came to commercial reality for decades. Between 2010 and 2023, over $7 billion was invested globally in electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, the modern flying car category, according to McKinsey & Company analysis. Terrafugia, PAL-V, and Aeromobile have each raised hundreds of millions, produced flying prototypes, and achieved no meaningful consumer sales volumes. The regulatory problem compounds the engineering problem. A vehicle classified as a car must meet automotive safety standards, and a vehicle classified as an aircraft must meet aviation certification standards. And meeting both simultaneously creates weight and cost penalties that make the economics collapse before the vehicle does. 70 years of 20 years away. $7 billion in modern investment. The driveway is still waiting for a product that has been arriving since before most of its investors were born. 53. The microfluidic lab-on-a-chip investment category attracted approximately $4.8 billion between 2015 and 2022 on a premise that sounded, in pitch decks, like an obvious compression of existing technology. Take what a hospital laboratory does across dozens of machines and compress it onto a device the size of a credit card, enabling point-of-care diagnostics anywhere without specialized equipment or trained technicians. The challenge that absorbed $4.8 billion is that different diagnostic tests require fundamentally different reaction conditions, reagent stability requirements, and detection mechanisms. A platform capable of running 2 tests reliably does not scale to 200 tests through incremental engineering. Each additional test category introduces multiplicative complexity. Abbott's iStat device has successfully delivered a limited panel of approximately 30 tests at point of care, demonstrating genuine narrow success while simultaneously illustrating the precise gap between partial and comprehensive laboratory replacement. FDA regulatory requirements for diagnostic accuracy constrained numerous startups whose claimed analytical performance did not survive independent clinical validation, the same pattern that ultimately exposed Theranos, which was itself the most famous entry in this investment category. The credit card laboratory works for 12 tests. The hospital runs 400. Investors funded the distance between 12 and 400 as though it were a rounding error rather than a different problem entirely. 54. Every major television manufacturer launched a 3-dimensional television line following Avatar's theatrical success in 2009. Samsung, LG, Sony, and Vizio all entered the format. Industry analysts projected 100 million 3-dimensional television households by 2014. Approximately $1.5 billion in manufacturing investment flowed into the category between 2010 and 2014 from major electronics companies operating on the shared assumption that the cinema experience people had paid premium prices to have would translate directly into a living room behavior they would sustain indefinitely. 3 consistent complaints defined consumer rejection of the format: the requirement to wear active or passive 3-dimensional glasses during home viewing, a reduction in picture brightness of roughly 50 to 70% caused by the polarizing filters, and a chronic shortage of 3-dimensional content outside theatrical releases. ESPN launched a dedicated 3-dimensional sports channel in 2010 and shut it down in 2013, citing limited viewer demand. DirecTV closed its 3-dimensional channels in 2012. Samsung officially discontinued all 3-dimensional television production in 2016. LG and Sony followed by 2017. The entire industry abandoned the format within 7 years of its peak investment. You watched Avatar in glasses and concluded living rooms wanted homework before every movie. The glasses are in a landfill. The televisions followed. 55. Sony's Betamax launched in 1975. JVC's VHS launched in 1976. By objective technical measurement, picture resolution, audio quality, tape durability, Betamax was the superior format. Sony knew this. Sony said this. Sony continued saying this, while VHS systematically captured the consumer market. The decisive variable was not picture quality. Early Betamax tapes held 1 hour of recording time. Early VHS tapes held 2 hours, enough to record a complete feature film or a football game in a single recording session without tape change. Sony resisted extending Betamax tape duration because longer recording time required compromises to picture quality, and Sony had decided it was selling a picture quality product. Video rental stores made the decision that ended the format war. They standardized on VHS because longer tapes meant fewer cassette changes per film, and as rental became the primary consumer use case, format availability at the video store determined which hardware consumers bought. Sony discontinued Betamax consumer production in 2002, 27 years after launch, while maintaining that Betamax was the technically superior product, a technically accurate statement about a format that lost. You built the better product. The rental store chose the longer tape. The rental store was the market. The market did not consult the picture quality specification. 56. Google launched a social network in June 2011 with the full integration capabilities of the world's most powerful internet company and a privacy model called Circles that was genuinely more sophisticated than anything Facebook offered at the time. YouTube commenting was forced through Google accounts. Gmail contacts were linked. Search surfaced the platform's content preferentially. The company applied every lever available to a company of its scale to make the network succeed through institutional gravity rather than organic user desire. A 2012 internal study leaked to the press found that the average post on the platform received 0 interactions. Not a negligible number, literally 0. Across the vast majority of content published. The users had accounts. The accounts had no activity. In 2018, the Wall Street Journal revealed that Google had concealed a data breach affecting approximately 500,000 users for 7 months, fearing regulatory and reputational consequences. The consumer platform was shut down in April 2019. An enterprise version was rebranded as Google Currents and discontinued entirely in 2023. 400 million accounts. 0 average interactions per post. You built the most expensively integrated ghost town in internet history, hid a data breach inside it for 7 months, and then quietly demolished it. The accounts were real. The social network was not. 57. Microsoft spent 2 years and approximately $1 billion building a phone for teenagers that required a smartphone data plan, ran no applications, had no app store, and sold 503 units in 48 days before being discontinued. That is item 23 on this list. What follows it in the catalog of Microsoft hardware ambitions is the Facebook phone, or, more precisely, the HTC first running Facebook Home, which launched in April 2013 exclusively on AT&T at $99 with a 2-year contract. Facebook Home was an Android overlay that displayed Facebook content on the lock screen and home screen as the primary interface, replacing standard smartphone functionality with social feed rather than supplementing it. AT&T reduced the price to 99 cents within 3 weeks on May 3, 2013, signaling catastrophic sales performance in the only language a price cut speaks. The device was discontinued in June 2013, approximately 6 weeks after launch. User reviews consistently identified the same problem. Facebook Home made the phone less useful as a general computing device. People want Facebook as an app they open when they choose to open it. $99. 3 weeks. 99 cents. The market reviewed the Facebook phone in the only language markets speak clearly. AT&T translated the review into a price tag. 58. The Federal Trade Commission reached settlements in 2002 with 3 companies, AB Energizer, Abtronic, and Fast Abs, requiring refunds totaling approximately $32 million for marketing electrical muscle stimulation belts as capable of producing visible abdominal definition, weight loss, and dramatic body reshaping through passive use while seated or resting. The technology itself is legitimate. Electrical muscle stimulation genuinely contracts muscle tissue and is used in physical therapy for rehabilitation. The fraudulent claim was not that the electricity worked, but that the result of the electricity, in the absence of caloric deficit and cardiovascular exercise, would produce the aesthetic outcome shown in the advertising. You cannot develop visible abdominal definition through muscle stimulus alone without addressing the layer of tissue between the muscle and the camera. The FTC's $32 million settlement reached only a fraction of the people who purchased the products. Total infomercial revenue from electrical muscle stimulation belts in the 90s and 2000s was estimated in the hundreds of millions. Electrical muscle stimulation AB belts continue to be sold today under various brand names. The FTC has issued multiple subsequent warnings. The category generates consistent revenue because the desire to achieve a physical result without the process required to achieve it is not a problem that a regulatory action resolves. The products are still available. So is the desire. 59. Cranberry juice generates approximately $200 million annually in the United States, on the premise that the proanthocyanidins in cranberry inhibit bacterial adhesion in the urinary tract, preventing and treating urinary tract infections. The mechanism is real in laboratory conditions. The problem is concentration. Commercial cranberry juice contains insufficient proanthocyanidins at the volumes a person actually drinks to replicate the concentrations that produce the laboratory effect. A 2012 Cochrane Systematic Review, the gold standard of medical evidence synthesis, examined 24 studies and found that cranberry products showed some trends toward reducing urinary tract infection incidence, but the evidence was not statistically robust enough to recommend the product as a treatment. A 2016 randomized controlled trial published in JAMA Internal Medicine followed 185 women and found no significant difference in urinary tract infection incidence between those drinking cranberry juice and those drinking a placebo. The studies are published. The journals are accessible. The $200 million in annual sales continues flowing because the belief precedes the evidence, and, for most people, the belief is sufficient. $200 million a year for a product the Cochrane Review could not confirm works as marketed. The bacteria were not informed of the cultural tradition. The tradition predates the clinical trial by approximately 50 years. 60. Solar Roadways raised approximately $2.2 million through a viral Indiegogo campaign in 2014, accumulated $4.4 million in total federal grants across 2 Department of Energy contracts, and generated a promotional video that reached over 20 million views by describing a future in which every road surface simultaneously generates electricity, melts snow, and displays digital markings. A vision so appealing that 50,000 individual backers contributed money to make it real. The physics constraints were available before the campaign launched. Road-embedded panels are covered by vehicles during the moments when solar collection would otherwise occur. Horizontal panels collect 30 to 40% less energy than optimally angled installations. Road surfaces must withstand repeated impact loads from vehicles weighing thousands of pounds, and crystalline silicon solar cells are not engineered for repeated impact. France installed the world's first solar road, 1 kilometer of panels in Normandy, in 2016 at a cost of approximately 5 million euros. By 2019, it had produced roughly half its projected power output, and the panels were fracturing under traffic load. France announced in 2020 it was ending the program. You paved a road with the world's most fragile technology and drove trucks over it. The trucks behaved exactly as trucks have always behaved. The panels were not designed for trucks and were placed directly in front of trucks. 61. The Ford Nucleon was a 1958 concept car presented at scale model exhibitions as a vision of personal transportation powered by a miniaturized nuclear reactor in the rear of the vehicle, requiring no refueling for the life of the reactor and emitting no exhaust. Ford did not build a full-scale, functional prototype because the physics of the concept made a full-scale functional prototype impossible with the materials and shielding technology of 1958 or any year since. The weight of radiation shielding required to protect vehicle occupants from a reactor small enough to fit in a car would be measured in tons. Ford's own designer estimated the reactor package alone at approximately 2,000 pounds, requiring roads, bridges, and parking structures rated far beyond what existed or has since been built. The Atomic Energy Commission issued multiple reports through the 1950s discussing domestic scale nuclear power with institutional optimism about timelines that were not met. Small modular reactors represent the modern iteration of the miniaturized reactor concept. NuScale Power received Nuclear Regulatory Commission design approval in 2022 for grid-scale industrial application, not residential use, and canceled its flagship commercial project in 2023 due to cost overruns. The home reactor has been arriving for 60 years. The 2,000-pound shielding requirement has not changed. The roads have not been upgraded for it. 62. Bandai sold approximately 40 million Tamagotchi units in the first 12 months following the 1996 launch, creating retail lines, cultural saturation, and the reasonable investor conclusion that a permanent mass-market category had been established around digital pet ownership, delivered through dedicated handheld hardware. The toy generated approximately $1.4 billion in revenue in 1998 alone. Bandai and the competitors who flooded the category, Gigapet, Nanopet, Digimon, collectively committed hundreds of millions in manufacturing investment to a market that behaved as toy fad markets behave. It peaked, reversed, and left inventory. Sales dropped sharply after the initial craze. Multiple Bandai revival attempts, including the Tamagotchi Connection in 2004 and Tamagotchi Friends in 2014, achieved sales significantly below the original wave. Competitors absorbed write-downs as the category collapsed faster than production lines could be retooled. The concept of digital pet ownership was not wrong. It migrated successfully to mobile applications, including Poe and My Talking Tom, where distribution cost is near zero and no dedicated hardware is required. The concept survived the crash. The dedicated hardware business model did not. You built a factory for a keychain pet. The phone arrived and offered the same pet for free. The factory had already invoiced. 63. On January 1st of the year 2000, the global infrastructure did not collapse. Planes flew. Power grids stayed on. ATMs dispensed cash. Nuclear facilities continued normal operation. Financial systems processed transactions. The catastrophic simultaneous failure of computer systems that had stored years as 2 digits, which would cause them to interpret the year 2000 as 1900 and create cascading errors across interconnected systems, did not occur at the scale that had been predicted with confidence across the preceding 5 years. Governments and corporations worldwide spent an estimated $300 to $600 billion on remediation between 1995 and 1999, employing hundreds of thousands of programmers to audit and update legacy code. Countries that spent significantly less on remediation, including Italy and several developing nations, experienced no more failures than countries that spent heavily, which some analysts cite as evidence the threat was overstated. Genuine errors did occur. Minor government system glitches, some processing anomalies, isolated equipment failures. None approached the systemic collapse the investment scale implied was being prevented. The $300 to $600 billion in Y2K spending funded a genuine infrastructure upgrade regardless of the actual risk level. You spent $500 billion preventing a disaster that may not have existed at the scale predicted. The infrastructure is better for it. The threat remains genuinely contested. 64. LG demonstrated an internet-connected refrigerator concept at CES in the year 2000. Samsung followed. GE followed. Whirlpool followed. Each demonstration showed a touchscreen on the door, camera visibility into the refrigerator interior, barcode scanning capability, and integration with grocery delivery services. A vision of a refrigerator that tracked its own contents, suggested recipes based on what it held, and automatically reordered items before they ran out. 25 years of concept refrigerators and hundreds of millions in development costs have produced a category that consumer behavior has declined to adopt at the scale the investment assumed. The core user experience problem is structural. Tracking what leaves a refrigerator requires either the user to scan every item removed, a behavior change consumers have not adopted, or cameras with computer vision accurate enough to identify partially used containers and irregular produce, which requires processing power and raises privacy questions consumers have not resolved. Samsung's Family Hub refrigerator, launched in 2016 at $3,000 to $6,000, includes interior cameras and a touchscreen. Consumer reviews consistently note the cameras are rarely used for inventory management. The touchscreen is primarily used as a family photo display. A magnetic notepad on the door accomplishes the same grocery list function. The notepad costs 49 cents. The touchscreen refrigerator costs $6,000. Both outcomes are a list of things to buy at the store. 65. The H2 Hummer was marketed and purchased as a military-capable vehicle descended from the genuine battlefield hardware that had impressed civilian observers during Gulf War coverage. A truck that implied, through its dimensions, its aggressive geometry, and its starting price of approximately $50,000, that it possessed serious off-road capability, unavailable in conventional passenger vehicles. The H1 Hummer was genuinely derived from the military HMMWV and had legitimate off-road credentials, including 16 inches of ground clearance and portal axles. The H2 shared neither the H1's platform nor its portal axles, using a conventional solid-axle drivetrain mounted on a GMT 820 truck platform shared with the Chevrolet Suburban, with 10 inches of ground clearance. Off-road publications, including Four Wheeler magazine, tested the H2 and found it outperformed by standard pickup trucks in approach angle, departure angle, and water-fording depth, the three primary metrics by which off-road capability is measured. The vehicle achieved 10 miles per gallon in city driving as its primary use case. General Motors discontinued the Hummer brand in 2010 when a planned sale to a Chinese manufacturer fell through. You paid $50,000 for a Suburban wearing an aggressive costume. The Suburban had better ground clearance. The costume cost significantly more than the capability it implied. 66. The non-fungible token market reached approximately $17 billion in monthly transaction volume in January 2022. Digital artist Beeple sold a single work at Christie's for $69 million in March 2021. The argument was coherent on its surface. Blockchain technology could create verifiable scarcity for digital assets, solving the fundamental problem that digital files can be copied infinitely and enabling creators to receive royalties on secondary sales in perpetuity. By September 2023, monthly transaction volume had declined approximately 97% from its January 2022 peak. A September 2023 analysis of 73,257 non-fungible token collections found that 69,795 of them, 95%, had a market capitalization of 0 ETH, meaning they were functionally worthless. The royalty enforcement mechanism that was central to the creator economics argument was abandoned or made optional by OpenSea, Blur, and other major marketplaces in 2022 and 23 as platform competition drove the elimination of royalties to attract traders. The feature that justified the investment was removed by the platforms within 2 years of the peak. 69 million for a JPEG whose marketplace stopped, enforcing royalties before the market had finished collapsing. 95% of all collections are now worth zero. The revolution lasted one market cycle and one royalty policy change. 67. Nikola Corporation's hill rolling truck was item 16 on this list. What belongs beside it in the catalog of transportation valuations, detached from operational reality, is WeWork. Not a transportation company, but a real estate company that signed long-term commercial leases and rented desk space on short-term agreements, which is a business model as old as commercial property. The company's founder, Adam Neumann, reframed this as a technology platform, a community company. And the reframing was sufficiently compelling that SoftBank and other investors collectively valued the company at $47 billion in January 2019. SoftBank ultimately invested approximately $18.5 billion. The August 2019 IPO filing revealed $3.2 billion in net losses over the prior 18 months on $1.8 billion in revenue, and included a reference to the founder's dog having a special place in company culture, which became the detail that defined public perception of the document's relationship with conventional business logic. Neumann resigned in September 2019. WeWork went public via SPAC merger in 2021 at $9 billion and filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in November 2023. $47 billion for a company that rented desks. The dog was in the filing. The dog should have been the warning. The bankruptcy arrived on schedule. 68. Quibi was item 46. The lesson it offered, that a platform built for mobile consumption that cannot be viewed on a television has a structural product problem, did not require a $1.75 billion experiment to discover. But that was the price of the discovery. What sits beside Quibi in the streaming investment category is the three-dimensional television market, which is item 54. And what connects them is the same fundamental error. The assumption that a behavior people perform in one context, watching three-dimensional films in a cinema, watching short video on a commute, will translate directly into a different context where the friction that made the original experience special either disappears or inverts. In the cinema, three-dimensional glasses are part of the event. In a living room, they are homework. On a commute, short video is a constraint solution. In a locked-down apartment with a large screen and nowhere to go, short video is a mismatch. Neither the three-dimensional television industry nor Quibi had a mechanism for testing whether the behavior would transfer before committing the capital that the transfer assumption required. $1.5 billion in manufacturing investment for three-dimensional televisions. $1.75 billion for a phone-only streaming platform that couldn't reach the television 3 feet away. Both industries discovered the same thing. The behavior belonged to the context, not to the content. 69. The Sinclair C5 launched in January 1985 as an open-air electric tricycle with a top speed of 15 miles per hour, a seated position at the bumper height of surrounding traffic, and no weather protection of any kind, in Britain in January, which is among the most reliably cold and wet combinations of month and country available on the calendar. That context established, here is the broader pattern the C5 represents. The personal electric vehicle category has attracted significant investment in every decade since the 1970s, on the premise that consumer behavior is ready for a fundamental shift in personal transportation. And in every decade, the infrastructure, the range anxiety, the charging availability, or in the C5's case, the weather and the traffic visibility, has produced a result substantially below the projection. Clive Sinclair had genuine credibility from home computing. He applied that credibility to a vehicle category the market had not requested. 5,000 units sold against hundreds of thousands projected. The Automobile Association warned against using it on public roads. The company folded within months. The electric vehicle category eventually succeeded, through Tesla, through government incentive structures, through charging infrastructure built over 30 subsequent years. The C5 was not wrong about electric vehicles. It was wrong about January, about Britain, and about whether the market was ready for a tricycle at bumper height with no roof. 70 Beanie Babies are item 31 on this list. What belongs beside them in the catalog of collectible investment manias is the trading card market of the early 1990s, which operated on identical psychological mechanics. Artificial scarcity, retirement announcements, community-validated price escalation, and a belief that new buyers would continue entering the market at higher prices indefinitely, and produced an identical outcome when the speculative wave reversed. The sports trading card market peaked in approximately 1991 to 1992, with manufacturers including Topps, Fleer, Score, and Upper Deck producing so many cards across so many product lines that the scarcity that had made vintage cards valuable was systematically destroyed by the volume of new product. Collectors who had invested thousands of dollars in sealed boxes and graded rookie cards watched values collapse as the supply overwhelmed the speculative demand that had been driving prices. The hobby recovered decades later through graded card authentication and a new generation of collectors, but the investors who bought at peak 1991 prices and expected continued appreciation absorbed losses that took 30 years to partially recover. Artificial scarcity requires the manufacturer to actually maintain the scarcity. When the manufacturer prints more cards to meet demand, the scarcity that justified the investment price dissolves with the next print run. 71 Motorola led a consortium that raised approximately $5 billion to design, manufacture, and launch 66 low Earth orbit satellites, forming the Iridium constellation, a network that would allow phone calls from literally anywhere on the planet's surface, eliminating the geographic limitation that had defined telecommunications since its invention. The engineering achievement was genuine. The satellites worked. The constellation was completed. The phones connected from locations where no terrestrial cell signal existed. The handsets cost $3,000. Calls cost between $3 and $7 per minute. The handsets were the size and weight of a brick. 95% of the global population lived within existing cellular coverage and had access to handsets that cost a fraction of $3,000 with per-minute rates that required no satellite network. The addressable market for a $3,000 phone with $7 per minute calls was extremely narrow. Remote explorers, offshore oil workers, maritime operators, and military users. Not the mainstream global communications market the $5 billion investment required to service profitably. Iridium filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in August 1999, 9 months after commercial launch, with $1.5 billion in debt. The network was purchased out of bankruptcy for $25 million by investors who reoriented it toward the narrow market it actually served. $5 billion to build it. $25 million to buy it after the market said no. 72. The Y2K remediation was item 63. $300 to $600 billion spent preventing a disaster whose actual scale remains genuinely contested. What belongs beside it is a different category of fear-driven investment. The pheromone fragrance market, the predator deterrent spray market, and the homeopathic remedy industry, which collectively generate billions annually by selling products whose claimed mechanisms are not supported by the peer-reviewed evidence that exists specifically to evaluate those mechanisms. The homeopathic remedy market alone was valued at approximately $4.6 billion globally in 2020, sustained by products that at common dilution levels contain not a single molecule of the original active substance. A mathematical fact derivable from Avogadro's number, which gives the maximum useful dilution as approximately 12C, well below the 30C concentration commonly sold. A 2015 comprehensive review by Australia's National Health and Medical Research Council examined 225 studies and found no good quality evidence that homeopathy is effective for any health condition. The FTC ruled in 2016 that homeopathic products must either cite scientific evidence or prominently disclose they have none. The disclosure requirement was implemented. Sales continued. The label is present on the packaging. The label is very small. The $4.6 billion is not small. 73. Amazon launched the local register in August 2014 with a card reader priced at $10, later reduced to 99 cents, and processing fees of 1.75%, lower than Square's standard 2.75%. As a direct competitive challenge to the market leader in small merchant point-of-sale payment processing. The price advantage was real. The fee differential was real. What Amazon did not account for, or did not weight correctly, is that Square's competitive moat was not its processing rate. Square's advantage was the broader ecosystem of point-of-sale software, inventory analytics, payroll integration, customer loyalty tools, and merchant services that small businesses had already integrated into their daily operations and were disinclined to abandon for a processing fee difference of 1 percentage point. Amazon discontinued the local register in October 2015, 14 months after launch, and sent merchants who had adopted the service a $20 credit towards Square hardware to facilitate their transition to the competitor that Amazon had set out to defeat. You discontinued your payment processor and issued your former customers a coupon redeemable at the competitor's store. The coupon was from Amazon. The check was made payable to Square. The market did not experience this as a competitive threat. It experienced it as a referral. 74. The Tupac Shakur projection at Coachella in 2012 was described in press coverage as a hologram, in investor presentations as evidence of a new entertainment era, and in the subsequent decade of attempted commercial deployment as an innovation that would allow deceased performers to tour again, reduce live performance costs, and create a permanent new format for music events. The technology used was the Pepper's Ghost technique, developed in 1862 by John Henry Pepper for Victorian stage illusions. It projects a two-dimensional image onto a transparent foil angled at 45 degrees to create the illusion of a three-dimensional presence. True holographic projection, a three-dimensional image visible from any angle without a screen or foil, does not exist at commercial scale. AV Concepts, which created the Tupac projection, was acquired by Pulse Evolution, which publicly traded on anticipated demand for holographic entertainment that did not materialize at the projected scale. Commercial holographic concerts produced in the decade following Coachella, 2012, number fewer than a dozen significant productions. A projection technique invented in 1862 generated a billion-dollar investment thesis in 2012. The Victorian engineers who developed the technique did not anticipate its rebranding as a revolution. The foil is still angled at 45 degrees. The revolution has produced fewer than 12 shows. 75. Personal rapid transit. Small automated pods traveling on elevated guideways, delivering individual passengers directly to their destinations without intermediate stops. Attracted investment and serious planning consideration across 5 decades as an obvious solution to the inefficiency of fixed-route bus networks. The concept is elegant. The engineering is real. The deployment record is 2 meaningful commercial installations globally. The Heathrow Airport Terminal 5 pod system, consisting of 18 vehicles on 3.9 kilometers of track connecting a terminal to a car park, and the Masdar City system in Abu Dhabi, designed for a city of 50,000 residents that currently houses approximately 1,000. The Heathrow pods work well for their specific application, a single point-to-point route with predictable demand and no competing traffic. The system has not expanded beyond its original scope in over a decade of operation. Masdar City's residential development stalled so dramatically that the PRT serves a population orders of magnitude smaller than the system was designed for, making the economics of the installation essentially irrelevant as a data point. The network scalability problem is structural. Elevated guideway infrastructure costs scale with every kilometer of track added, creating an economics ceiling that has consistently made urban-scale deployment unviable compared to bus rapid transit. 5 decades of investment. 2 deployments. 1 serves an airport car park. The bus is still running the city. 76. The smart clothing investment wave attracted funding for dozens of startups between 2015 and 2020 on the premise that embedding sensors, biometric monitors, heating elements, and connectivity into garments would create a consumer category generating $5 billion in annual global revenue by 2022. The market generated approximately $1.2 billion in 2022, roughly 24% of projections. Most of the startups that attracted significant investment have shut down or pivoted away from the consumer market. Athos sold biometric athletic shirts. OM Signal sold biometric sports bras. Naughty X sold yoga pants with haptic vibration guidance for pose correction. Google and Levi's sold a $350 denim jacket with conductive yarn in the cuff that allowed tap gestures to control a connected phone. The jacket was discontinued in 2023. The consistent engineering problem is the washing machine. Electronic components embedded in clothing must survive repeated machine washing cycles, and solving that problem increases manufacturing cost to a level that consumers reviewing the price tag do not find proportionate to the benefit delivered. The yoga pants vibrate to tell you your warrior pose is off. Your instructor also does this, costs less per session, amortized over a year, and does not need to be kept away from the spin cycle. 77 robo-advisors launched around 2010 with a compelling proposition. Algorithmic portfolio management at near zero cost would provide institutional quality investment management to retail investors who previously couldn't access it, and the combination of cost advantage and consistent methodology would pull assets away from human financial advisors at a rate that would fundamentally restructure the wealth management industry within a decade. As of 2023, robo-advisors manage approximately $1.4 trillion in assets globally, a genuine sum, meaningfully larger than nothing, and substantially smaller than the total global investable asset pool of approximately $150 trillion that the disruption thesis projected they would steadily capture. Human financial advisors continue to manage the overwhelming majority of investable assets, and the wealth management industry has grown rather than contracted. The behavioral finance finding that explains this most clearly is straightforward. Investors with purely algorithmic portfolios sell during market downturns at higher rates than investors with human advisors, because human advisors provide the behavioral coaching that prevents panic selling in a declining market. The algorithm manages your portfolio with mathematical precision until the market drops 30% and you call someone in a panic. The someone you want to call is a human. The algorithm does not answer calls. That gap is why the industry did not restructure on the projected timeline. 78. Amazon opened its first cashierless Amazon Go convenience store in Seattle in January 2018, using computer vision and sensor fusion to charge customers automatically as they selected and removed items. A technology the company branded Just Walk Out. Analysts declared retail checkout dead. Major retailers began investing in similar technology. Amazon expanded to approximately 30 locations and began licensing Just Walk Out to third-party retailers, including sports arenas and airport shops. In March 2023, Amazon closed 8 Go stores and announced it was slowing the format's expansion. The Guardian reported in April 2024 that Amazon's Just Walk Out technology relied on approximately 1,000 workers in India watching video footage to manually verify and label transactions that the computer vision system could not resolve with sufficient confidence. Amazon subsequently disputed aspects of the reporting while acknowledging that human review was part of the system. The company announced it was removing just walkout from its Amazon Fresh grocery stores. The checkout-free store of the future contained 1,000 people watching video to determine what you had purchased. The artificial intelligence was partly people. The people were remote. The future required supervision at a scale that complicated the unit economics the format required to justify the infrastructure investment. The camera saw you. Someone also watched the camera. 79. The dietary supplement industry generates approximately $150 billion annually in global revenue through a regulatory framework in the United States that does not require manufacturers to demonstrate safety or efficacy before selling a product, does not mandate disclosure of individual ingredient amounts within a proprietary blend, and does not require pre-market review by the Food and Drug Administration. A proprietary blend listing on a supplement label is required only to list ingredients in descending order by weight, not to disclose how much of each ingredient is present. This allows manufacturers to list a clinically studied ingredient at the top of a proprietary blend, while including it at a fraction of the clinically studied dose, padded with inexpensive filler to reach the labeled serving weight. A 2015 New York State Attorney General investigation found that 79% of tested herbal supplements from major retailers did not contain the primary ingredient listed on the label. A 2020 study in JAMA Network Open found that approximately 776 dietary supplement products contained unapproved pharmaceutical drugs not listed on the label. $150 billion annually. The label lists the ingredients. The amounts are optional. The efficacy demonstration is not required. You are paying for the label and trusting that what it lists is inside in the quantity that would matter. 80. Between 2015 and 2023, every major automotive and technology company published confident timelines for fully autonomous Level 5 self-driving vehicles, capable of handling any road condition, in any weather, in any geographic context, without human input or intervention. Tesla, Waymo, GM's Cruise, Ford's Argo AI, and dozens of well-funded startups placed the arrival of full autonomy between 2020 and 2025. Cumulative global investment in autonomous vehicle technology exceeded $100 billion between 2014 and 2023. Argo AI, backed by $3.6 billion from Ford and Volkswagen, shut down in October 2022 after its investors concluded that Level 4 urban autonomy was not commercially viable in the near term. GM's Cruise suspended its robotaxi operations in October 2023 after a vehicle struck and dragged a pedestrian, and GM wrote down $583 million related to the incident and subsequent operational pause. The self-driving challenge is the long tail. Rare and unusual road scenarios that occur infrequently, but must be handled reliably before deployment is responsible. $100 billion has moved the capability significantly forward. The steering wheel remains in the vehicle. The last 1% of reliability is where all the actual driving happens. 81. Ariane Supersonic raised hundreds of millions over 17 years, partnered with Boeing for manufacturing support in 2019, and publicly claimed $11.2 billion in orders for its AS-2 supersonic business jet, a figure that would have represented a transformative commercial success for a vehicle category that has not yet delivered a single certified aircraft to a paying customer. Boeing ended its Ariane partnership in early 2021. Ariane shut down entirely in May 2021, citing insufficient capital rather than technical failure, which is a distinction that matters less to investors than it sounds. The sonic boom regulation problem that constrains commercial supersonic passenger aircraft applies identically to business jets. Supersonic flight over populated land masses is prohibited in most jurisdictions, limiting the route utility of supersonic capability to transoceanic corridors, regardless of how fast the aircraft can fly over water. The addressable market for a supersonic business jet, priced at $60 to $120 million, is estimated at approximately 300 to 600 potential buyers globally. A market so narrow that development economics require per-unit margins or manufacturing volumes the market size cannot support simultaneously. 11.2 billion in claimed orders. 0 aircraft delivered. The order is not a delivery. The deposit is not a plane. The sonic boom is still illegal over the land where most of the buyers live. 82. The Amazon Fire Phone is item 24. The Microsoft Kin is item 23. The HTC first running Facebook Home is item 57. Each represents a different company, making the same fundamental error. Building a phone whose primary purpose serves the manufacturer's commercial interests rather than the user's needs, then pricing it identically to phones built to serve the user, and being surprised when the user chooses the phone built for them. The Sony mini disc belongs in a related category, a format with genuine technical merit whose proprietary ecosystem requirements prevented adoption at the moment when the broader digital music ecosystem was consolidating around open standards. Sony launched Minidisc in 1992 after a development investment exceeding $500 million. The format offered digital quality and random access that the cassette tape could not match. It could not be played in a CD player. Its proprietary digital rights management prevented straightforward computer transfer. The MP3 required no special hardware, no proprietary software, no format-specific device. Sony discontinued mini-disc production in 2013, 21 years after launch, with total investment across development, manufacturing, and marketing estimated to exceed $1 billion. The format was better than the cassette. The MP3 was more convenient than the format. Convenience defeated quality again, on the same schedule, for the same reasons that it had already defeated Betamax 14 years earlier. 83. The personal submarine market has attracted investment across 3 decades on an analogy that sounds reasonable. If personal boats are a mainstream recreational product, personal submarines are the obvious natural extension into the underwater dimension of the same leisure impulse, and has produced a market that moves approximately 300 to 500 units per year globally at prices between $300,000 and $3 million per unit, primarily to mega yacht owners, research institutions, and ultra-high net worth individuals who represent a self-limiting population. U.S. Submarines, Triton submarines, and deep flight each raised investment in personal submersible development through the 1990s and 2000s, projecting declining costs through manufacturing scale that has not materialized across 30 years of commercial production. The cost trajectory has not improved meaningfully because the engineering requirements that make a personal submarine safe, pressure hull integrity, life support systems, emergency ballast mechanisms, viewport certification, do not become cheaper through volume at the production numbers this market generates. Deep Flight, backed by Richard Branson, produced innovative superlight designs specifically targeting accessibility. Commercial production volumes remain in the dozens per year. The regulatory requirements demand surface support vessels and trained pilots, eliminating the casual recreational use case that underpins the personal boat analogy. The scuba diving certification and equipment solve the same underwater curiosity for $300 and a weekend. The submarine solves it for $3 million and a support ship. 84. Broadcast.com was item 22. Mark Cuban sold Yahoo, a streaming company, for $5.7 billion and immediately hedged. Napster is the companion to that story from the other direction. 80 million users, a catastrophically illegal business model, and $85 million in investment from Bertelsmann AG, attempting to pivot the service to paid subscription while the Recording Industry Association of America filed the lawsuit that would end it. Napster launched in June 1999 and grew to approximately 80 million registered users by 2001, one of the fastest user acquisition curves in internet history at that point. The user acquisition was achieved by offering something people wanted, any song, for free, immediately, through a mechanism that was straightforwardly illegal under existing copyright law. Bertelsmann invested approximately $85 million attempting to convert that user base into paying subscribers for a legal service. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in February 2001 that Napster was liable for contributory and vicarious copyright infringement. A court injunction ordered the service filtered and then shut down. Napster filed for bankruptcy in 2002. The model it pioneered, on-demand music streaming, was eventually commercialized legally by Spotify, Apple Music, and others. 80 million users. No legal path to charging any of them. The product worked. The business model was a crime. Those are different problems with the same consequence. 85. Solyndra raised approximately $1.03 billion in total. $538 million from a Department of Energy loan guarantee and the remainder from private investors. To manufacture cylindrical copper indium gallium selenide solar panels designed to capture sunlight from multiple angles on flat commercial rooftops, reducing installation costs compared to conventional panel arrays. The engineering logic was sound for the market conditions of 2006 to 2008, when the price of conventional crystalline silicon solar panels made Solyndra's higher-cost proprietary technology competitively viable. Between 2008 and 2011, the global price of conventional crystalline silicon solar panels dropped approximately 80%, driven by massive Chinese manufacturing investment and government industrial subsidies at a scale and speed that Solyndra's financial models had not incorporated as a realistic scenario. When the price of the conventional alternative falls 80%, a product that was viable at the old price is no longer viable at any reasonable margin, regardless of its technical advantages. Solyndra filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in August 2011 and laid off 1,100 employees. The technology was sound. The market variable that invalidated the business model moved faster and further than the model assumed it could move. $538 million in the direct path of a global price collapse that nobody modeled at the velocity it actually occurred. 86. Goop launched jade and rose quartz eggs for internal use in 2017, with marketing language describing hormonal balance and connections to ancient feminine wisdom, generating immediate response from gynecologists who warned that porous stones used internally could harbor bacteria and raise genuine infection risk. The California Food, Drug, and Medical Device Task Force agreed there was a regulatory problem. Goop settled for $145,000 and agreed not to make unsubstantiated health claims without scientific evidence. That settlement appears in item 10 of this list. What belongs beside it is the broader wellness product investment category that operates on identical regulatory logic. The space between a medical claim, which requires clinical evidence, and a wellness claim, which requires considerably less, is where hundreds of millions in product investment lives comfortably. The homeopathic remedy market, valued at $4.6 billion globally, occupies this space. The pheromone fragrance market occupies this space. The dietary supplement proprietary blend market occupies this space. Each category sells a claimed mechanism to a consumer who cannot verify the mechanism under a regulatory framework that does not require the manufacturer to verify it before the sale. $145,000 fine. $250 million in annual Goop revenue. The fine is not a deterrent at that ratio. It is a rounding error dressed as accountability. 87. Nicholas Hill was item 16. Theranos was items 2 and 36. FTX is item 101. The pattern they share, and the pattern that connects them to LearnOut and Housebee, to WeWork, to Juchero is not stupidity among the investors. The investors were sophisticated. The pattern is the systematic mispricing of verification cost. When a technology or a business model is sufficiently novel, the due diligence required to evaluate it is itself expensive, time-consuming, and dependent on expertise that may not exist within the investment organization. The shortcut is social proof. If credible investors have already committed, if credible institutions have already partnered, if credible press has already covered it positively, the verification cost feels like it has already been paid by someone else. Theranos had George Shultz. WeWork had SoftBank. FTX had Sequoia. The credibility of the existing investors substituted for independent verification of the underlying claim. And when the underlying claim was fraudulent, the social proof network amplified the fraud rather than catching it, because everyone in the network was using everyone else as their verification. You trusted the people who trusted the people who trusted the people. Nobody checked the machine. Nobody looked inside the exchange. The jar was never opened. 88. The Segway Polo League is item 31 on this list, which documents a sport that peaked at approximately 20 teams globally and is largely inactive as a competitive structure. Beside it belongs the broader pattern of technologies that found their actual market only after their imagined market declined to appear, and the investments that were priced for the imagined market rather than the actual one. The Segway found enterprise use in factories and warehouses. The mini-disc found enthusiastic adoption in Japan, while North America ignored it. The Iridium satellite network, purchased out of bankruptcy for $25 million, serves remote workers and military users profitably at a fraction of its construction cost. Google Glass, stripped of its consumer branding, serves surgeons and factory floor workers who need a hands-free screen without caring what it looks like. In each case, the actual market existed. It was smaller than projected, more specific than imagined, and willing to pay for genuine utility rather than the aspiration the original investment was priced around. The $25 million purchase of a $5 billion network is the most instructive transaction in this list. The asset was real. The market it was built for was not. The market it actually served was there the entire time, just not the one anyone modeled in the pitch deck. 89. The digital newspaper transition absorbed enormous investment, content management systems, video production infrastructure, digital sales teams, programmatic advertising integration, on the premise that moving journalism online would reduce costs while expanding audiences and revenue. The opposite occurred for most publishers. United States newspaper advertising revenue peaked at approximately $49 billion in 2000. By 2022, it had declined to approximately $8 billion, an 84% reduction over 22 years. More than 2,500 American newspapers closed between 2004 and 2022. The mechanism of decline was straightforward. Print newspapers held geographic advertising monopolies. Digital distribution eliminated geographic monopoly by making every publisher's content available to every reader, driving advertising inventory to near infinite supply, collapsing CPM rates to fractions of print equivalents. The investment in digital infrastructure did not address the structural destruction of the business model. It digitized the operations of a business whose revenue source was evaporating. The successful digital news models, subscription-based publications with direct reader revenue, represent a business model that was available before the internet and simply was not adopted until advertising collapsed. The printing press was not the problem. The monopoly was the entire business. The internet ended the monopoly. The investment funded the transition to a destination that no longer had a viable economy waiting at it. 90. Juchero is item 6. The machine that squeezed proprietary pouches at 4 tons of pressure, requiring a Wi-Fi connection to verify the pouch's authorization, and whose entire mechanical function could be replicated by squeezing the pouch with your hands. $120 million. The Wi-Fi checked the bag. The insight that belongs beside Juchero is not about juice. It is about the consistent investor appetite for hardware that creates a proprietary consumable ecosystem, a business model where the device is the razor and the proprietary input is the blade. The model works when the device creates genuine capability that cannot be replicated without the ecosystem, the printer and the ink cartridge, the coffee machine, and the pod. The model does not work when the device's function can be replicated by squeezing the bag with your hands. Investors funded Juchero at $120 million because the razor and blade model generates recurring revenue, and recurring revenue commands premium valuations. What the valuation did not account for is that the blade needs to do something the customer cannot do without it. The Juchero bag could be squeezed by hand. The hand does not charge a subscription fee. The hand does not require a Wi-Fi connection. The hand was there the entire time, available at no additional cost, performing the identical function without a $400 intermediary. 91. MoviePass charged $9.95 for a product that cost $15 and acquired 3 million customers. That is item 38. The Amazon Dash button was discontinued after usage data showed most households pressed it fewer than 3 times. That is item 37. The pattern connecting them, and connecting Cosmo, and Pets.com, and Webvan, is the consistent investor enthusiasm for growth metrics that are downstream of a subsidy rather than upstream of genuine demand. MoviePass's 3 million subscribers were responding to a $9 price for a $15 product. The moment the subsidy was removed, when MoviePass introduced a delivery fee to address unit economics, the subscribers left because the demand was for the price point rather than the product. Cosmo's users were responding to free delivery of any item with no minimum order. When Cosmo added a delivery fee, the users who defined its growth left. The metric that attracted the investment, user count, subscriber count, order volume, was measuring how many people wanted a subsidized product, not how many people would pay sustainable prices for the underlying service. Growth built on a subsidy is not demand. It is a measurement of the size of the subsidy. The subsidy eventually ends. The measurement changes. The investors are already in. 92. The Amazon Go cashierless store is item 78. The checkout-free retail format, whose just walk-out technology relied on approximately 1,000 remote reviewers watching video footage to verify transactions the computer vision system could not resolve independently. Beside it belongs the broader autonomous vehicle investment story from item 80, where $100 billion has moved the capability forward, while the last fraction of reliability that separates a very good system from a deployable one continues to require human supervision to bridge. The consistent finding across both categories is that artificial intelligence systems perform reliably across the common cases and require human oversight for the edge cases. And in both retail checkout and vehicle operation, the edge cases occur at a frequency that makes human oversight expensive enough to challenge the unit economics that justified the investment. The fully autonomous store and the fully autonomous vehicle are both real, in the sense that prototypes exist and perform, and not yet commercially viable at the reliability thresholds their deployment contexts require. The gap between 99% reliable and 100% reliable is not a 1% problem. In a vehicle traveling at highway speed, or a checkout system processing thousands of transactions daily, the gap between 99 and 100% is where the liability lives, where the regulation lives, and where the unit economics collapse. 93. Altria Group paid $12.8 billion for a 35% stake in Juul Labs in December 2018, valuing the company at $38 billion. A figure that represented approximately 35 times Juul's revenue for that year and made it, at that moment, one of the highest valued startups in United States history. The investment thesis rested on the premise that e-cigarettes were a harm reduction tool that would help adult smokers transition away from combustible tobacco, and that regulatory frameworks would accommodate a product serving that public health function. Between 2017 and 2019, high school e-cigarette use increased by 135%, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The FDA issued a marketing denial order for Juul products in June 2022, citing insufficient evidence that the product's benefits for adult smokers outweighed the public health risk from youth adoption patterns. Altria recorded write-downs totaling approximately $8.6 billion on the investment by 2022. Juul agreed to pay $439 million across state settlements. $38 billion valuation. $8.6 billion in write-downs. The youth vaping data was the document the valuation was built on top of, pointing in the wrong direction the entire time. 94. Meta, formerly Facebook, announced in 2021 that it was betting the company's future on the metaverse, a persistent virtual reality social world where people would work, socialize, attend events, and spend meaningful portions of their daily lives as digital avatars. Mark Zuckerberg appeared in avatar form to make the announcement. The company changed its corporate name. It invested approximately $36 billion in its Reality Labs division between 2019 and 2023. Horizon Worlds, the flagship social virtual reality platform, had a reported monthly active user base of approximately 200,000 in late 2022, a number that internal memos described as very concerning, noting that 50% of new users did not return after their first week. Internal communications acknowledged that even Meta employees preferred not to spend time on the platform. Meta's stock declined approximately 77% from its peak between September 2021 and November 2022, erasing approximately $700 billion in market capitalization before recovering as the company refocused on artificial intelligence and advertising efficiency. $46 billion in accumulated Reality Labs losses, 200,000 monthly users, half of whom left after one visit. The metaverse is the most expensive empty room ever constructed. The exit door gets more use than the interior. 95. The Boring Company received a $48.7 million contract for the Las Vegas Convention Center Loop, which opened in 2021 as a 1.7-mile tunnel system connecting 3 stations beneath the convention center, using a fleet of Tesla vehicles driven by paid human drivers. The original pitch specified autonomous travel at 150 miles per hour. The operational system delivers approximately 35 miles per hour in human-driven vehicles, a 76% reduction from the marketed speed achieved without autonomy in a tunnel barely wide enough for one car. At its design capacity of approximately 4,400 passengers per hour, the Las Vegas Loop moves fewer people per hour than a single lane of bus rapid transit, which typically carries 6,000 to 8,000 passengers per hour at substantially lower infrastructure cost per kilometer. Las Vegas approved a loop expansion in 2022. Multiple other cities explored and declined Boring Company proposals. Chicago canceled exploratory negotiations. The traffic-eliminating 150 miles per hour autonomous tunnel is a 35 miles per hour human-driven tube that moves fewer people than the bus. The bus was already there before the tunnel was dug. The bus costs less per passenger mile. The bus does not require a $48.7 million contract to carry convention attendees to their next session. 96. The FTX cryptocurrency exchange achieved a peak valuation of $32 billion in January 2022, raising approximately $1.8 billion from investors including Sequoia Capital, SoftBank, and the Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan. The founder, Sam Bankman-Fried, had cultivated a public persona built around effective altruism, regulatory engagement, and the visual signal of studied informality. The shorts, the uncombed hair, the beanbag chair in the office. that communicated to, focused on the work, to care about appearances in a way that sophisticated investors apparently found reassuring rather than notable. An internal Alameda research balance sheet leaked to CoinDesk in November 2022 revealed that a significant portion of Alameda's assets consisted of FTT, FTX's own exchange token, circular collateral supporting the value of itself. The revelation triggered a bank run. FTX filed for bankruptcy on November 11, 2022, with an estimated $8 billion deficit between customer assets owed and assets held. John Ray III, the restructuring specialist brought in as new CEO, who had previously overseen Enron's bankruptcy proceedings, stated publicly that he had never seen such a complete failure of corporate controls in his career. Sam Bankman-Fried was convicted on all 7 criminal counts and sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The man who cleaned up Enron said this was worse. That sentence is the entire review. 97. The Ouija board received a patent in 1891. The patent examiner reportedly required a demonstration that it worked before approving it, during which the board allegedly spelled out his name. The story has not been independently verified, which is fitting. The ideomotor effect, where people make small physical movements unconsciously in response to expectation, belief, or suggestion, has been documented in psychology since the 19th century and completely explains the movement of the planchette without requiring any additional mechanism. Experiments with blindfolded participants consistently demonstrate that the planchette moves to wrong locations when participants cannot see the board, confirming that conscious or unconscious visual cues drive the movement rather than any external force. The participants are the spirit. They have always been the spirit. Hasbro currently markets the Ouija board as a toy and party game, which is the accurate product category. It continues generating revenue not as a communication device, but as an entertainment product that leverages genuine human uncertainty about unexplained phenomena. The investment in the original Ouija board business was not irrational. The product sells. The mechanism is real in the sense that the board moves. And the question of what moves it is one that humans have found compelling for over a century. You asked the board a question. The board answered with your hands. The hands knew the answer before you asked. 98. The self-cleaning house has been 5 years away since approximately 1955. Francis Gabe of Oregon spent decades constructing a self-cleaning house with 68 patented cleaning devices that used water jets throughout the interior, requiring all furniture and belongings to be waterproofed, which introduced a separate category of problems that the cleaning system's efficiency did not offset. Multiple World's Fair exhibitions in the 1950s and 60s featured conceptual self-cleaning home systems funded by appliance manufacturers. None reached commercial viability. The iRobot Roomba, launched in 2002, is the closest commercially successful approximation of domestic cleaning automation, and it handles flat floor vacuuming only, requires manual emptying, needs navigation assistance in complex room configurations, and represents a dramatically more modest capability than the fully automated home that absorbed the investment. Current estimates place full domestic robot cleaning viability at 15 to 20 years away. This estimate has been issued continuously since approximately 1955. The timeline has not moved in 70 years. The investment rounds have changed. The investors have changed. The estimate has not changed. The self-cleaning house is always 5 years away because the problem of cleaning varied surfaces in varied configurations with varied debris types remains unsolved at the cost. Consumers will pay for the solution. The Roomba vacuums the flat part. The rest is still yours. 99. The supersonic business jet category has produced claimed order books, announced partnerships, celebrated design milestones, and delivered 0 certified aircraft to paying customers as of the mid-2020s. Ariane Supersonic's $11.2 billion claimed order backlog is item 81. Beside it sits the broader pattern of aviation investment timelines that systematically underestimate certification complexity. The Federal Aviation Administration certification process for a new aircraft type is not a formality appended to successful engineering. It is a parallel process of documentation, testing, analysis, and regulatory review that has historically added years and hundreds of millions of dollars to programs whose engineering was otherwise complete. Supersonic aircraft add the sonic boom regulatory problem on top of standard certification. No regulatory framework exists to permit commercial supersonic flight over populated land in most jurisdictions, meaning a certified supersonic business jet cannot fly its core routes without overwater detours that reduce the speed advantage the ticket price is meant to justify. The certification process is long. The sonic boom is still illegal. The order is not a delivery. The announced partnership is not an aircraft. The design milestone is not a certification. You are holding a press release and calling it a plane. The press release has been updated annually for 17 years. The plane has not been delivered in any of them. 100. The Tamagotchi was item 62. 82 million units, a billion-dollar peak, and a collapse that left manufacturing investment stranded as the category migrated to mobile applications where distribution cost approaches zero. The NFT market is item 66, 17 billion in monthly transaction volume in January 2022, 97% decline by September 2023, 95% of all collections at zero market capitalization. Beanie Babies are item 31. Trading cards are item 70. Each of these markets shares a structure. The product's value is substantially defined by community belief in its future value rather than by utility delivered to the individual holder, which means the market is self-referential and the price is stable only as long as new participants continue to enter, with confidence that the price will rise further. When the new participants stop arriving, for any reason, at any moment, triggered by any external event, the self-referential price has no floor beneath it because the utility floor was never established. The Tamagotchi is a keychain. The NFT is a file. The Beanie Baby is a stuffed animal. The trading card is printed cardboard. Each of these things has genuine value to the person who finds it genuinely enjoyable. None of them has the investment value the market priced them at during the peak. The community was the price. When the community leaves, it takes the price with it. 101. FTX is item 96. Theranos is item 2. Enron is item 20. Learnout and Housebee is item 18. Each represents fraud at scale. Not a failed product. Not a mistimed market entry. Not an engineering problem that proved harder than projected, but a deliberate misrepresentation of what the investment was purchasing. The uncomfortable proximity of these items to the legitimately failed investments throughout this list is the final point. The fake inventions and the fraudulent ones look identical from the outside during the investment phase. Theranos had the same press coverage, the same institutional investor list, the same confident founder narrative as any legitimately ambitious startup. WeWork had $47 billion in valuation and was a real estate company. FTX had Sequoia and was running an $8 billion deficit in customer funds. The due diligence that would have caught the fraud is the same due diligence that would have caught the unit economics problem in MoviePass, the timing problem in Webvan, the market size problem in Iridium. Verification is the product you are actually buying when you invest. The pitch deck is not the investment. The PowerPoint is a story about the investment. You watched 101 stories. Some of them were failures. Some of them were lies. From where you were sitting, at the moment the money moved, they all looked exactly the same. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.